Have you ever wondered what lies hidden beneath the Earth's surface, forgotten by time itself? What if I told you that across our planet, entire civilizations have simply vanished, leaving behind only whispers of their former glory? Tonight, we're embarking on a journey into the unknown, where ancient streets once bustled with life, where magnificent temples reach toward the heavens, and where secrets still wait in the shadows of history. These aren't just stories from dusty textbooks. These are real places where people lived, loved, and built something extraordinary, only to see it all disappear into the mists of time. From golden cities swallowed by jungle vines to stone metropolises claimed by desert sands, we're about to explore mysteries that have puzzled archaeologists, historians, and explorers for generations. What makes these lost cities so compelling isn't just their grandeur or their tragic endings, it's the questions they leave behind. How did civilizations capable of such incredible achievements simply fade away? Why do some cities vanish without a trace while others leave tantalizing clues? And perhaps most intriguingly, what secrets might they still be hiding? So settle in, dim the lights, and prepare yourself for a journey across continents and through centuries. We're about to discover cities that time forgot, civilizations that defied explanation, and mysteries that continue to challenge everything we think we know about human history. This is your guide to the lost cities that once were, and the enduring enigmas they've left behind. Deep in the heart of the Amazon rainforest, where the air hangs thick with humidity and ancient secrets, lies one of archaeology's most tantalizing mysteries. The city known today as Quilap represents something extraordinary in the annals of lost civilizations. Perched high on a mountain ridge in northern Peru, this fortress city of the Chachapoya people challenges our understanding of pre-Columbian engineering and architectural prowess. The Chachapoya, often called the Warriors of the Clouds, built their citadel at an elevation of over 10,000 feet above sea level. Imagine constructing an entire city on a mountaintop, using stones that weigh several tons each, in an era without modern machinery, or even the wheel for transportation. The logistics alone seem impossible, yet here stands Quilap as proof of human ingenuity and determination. What strikes visitors first is the sheer audacity of the construction. Massive limestone walls, some reaching heights of 60 feet, encircle the entire city. These aren't crude stone barriers thrown together hastily. They're precisely fitted blocks, carefully shaped and positioned to create an impenetrable fortress that has withstood centuries of weather, earthquakes, and the relentless advance of jungle vegetation. The Chachapoya civilization flourished from roughly 900 to 1470 CE, creating a sophisticated society in one of the world's most challenging environments. They developed advanced agricultural techniques, creating terraced fields that clung to steep mountain slopes. They built an extensive network of roads and bridges that connected their mountain settlements across impossible terrain. Most remarkably, they constructed Quilap as their crowning achievement, a city that served simultaneously as fortress, ceremonial center, and administrative capital. But here's where the mystery deepens. Despite the obvious wealth and power required to build such a monument, the Chachapoya left behind no written records. Everything we know about them comes from archaeological evidence and the accounts of later Inca conquerors, who themselves seemed awed by what they'd discovered in the cloud forests. The city's design reveals a people obsessed with defense. There are only 3 entrances to the entire complex, each designed as a narrow funnel that would force attackers into single-file vulnerability. Inside these passages, defenders could rain down stones and spears from hidden positions above. The main entrance is particularly ingenious, narrowing from 9 feet to less than 3 feet as it progresses, making it impossible for large groups to rush through simultaneously. Yet Quilap wasn't just a military installation. Within its walls lie the remains of hundreds of circular stone houses, each carefully constructed with corbelled roofs and interior drainage systems. There are ceremonial platforms, storage facilities, and elaborate underground chambers whose purposes remain unclear. Some archaeologists believe certain structures served astronomical functions, aligning with celestial events crucial to agricultural cycles. The most enigmatic features of Kuelap are its underground chambers and tunnels. These spaces, carved directly into the bedrock, extend far beneath the city's surface. Some appear to have been used for storage, containing the remains of pottery and organic materials. Others seem more ritualistic in nature, with carved stone altars and drainage channels that suggest ceremonial use involving liquids, possibly blood or sacred chicha beer. One particularly intriguing chamber, known as the Tintero or inkwell, plunges deep into the mountain itself. This bottle-shaped underground space remains one of Kuelap's greatest puzzles. Its purpose could have been practical, serving as a massive storage silo for grain or other provisions. Alternatively, it might have held religious significance, perhaps representing a symbolic entrance to the underworld or serving as a sacred cenote for offerings to mountain spirits. The Chachapoya people themselves present another layer of mystery. Spanish chroniclers describe them as exceptionally tall and fair-skinned, with some individuals reaching heights unusual for indigenous South Americans. They noted that Chachapoya warriors were fierce fighters who resisted both Inca expansion and later Spanish conquest with remarkable tenacity. Their burial practices were equally distinctive, involving elaborate mummy bundles placed in cliff-face tombs that required extraordinary climbing skills to reach. But perhaps the greatest mystery surrounding Kuelap is the question of its abandonment. Archaeological evidence suggests the city was occupied for centuries, yet by the time Spanish conquistadors arrived in the 16th century, it had already been largely deserted. The Inca conquest of the Chachapoya in the 1470s certainly disrupted their society, but this alone doesn't explain why such a strategically important and heavily fortified city would be abandoned. Some theories point to environmental factors. The cloud forest environment, while lush and productive, is also unpredictable. Climate shifts could have affected the delicate balance of rainfall and temperature that made mountain agriculture possible. Extended droughts or unusual weather patterns might have forced the inhabitants to seek more reliable food sources elsewhere. Disease represents another possibility. When the Spanish arrived in South America, they brought with them devastating epidemics of smallpox, measles, and other Old World diseases to which indigenous populations had no immunity. These epidemics often preceded actual Spanish contact, spreading through trade networks and devastating entire civilizations before Europeans ever laid eyes on their cities. Political upheaval provides yet another explanation. The Inca Empire was highly efficient at relocating conquered populations, often moving entire communities to different regions to prevent rebellion. The Chachapoya, being skilled warriors and engineers, would have been valuable assets for the Inca war machine and public works projects. Many may have been forcibly resettled to other parts of the empire, leaving their mountain citadel empty. What makes Kuelap particularly fascinating is its recent rediscovery and ongoing revelation of secrets. While the site was never entirely lost to local knowledge, it remained largely unknown to the outside world until the 19th century. Even today, new discoveries continue to emerge from the site. Advanced laser scanning and ground-penetrating radar have revealed additional structures still hidden beneath centuries of vegetation and soil accumulation. Recent archaeological work has uncovered evidence of sophisticated metallurgy, including bronze and gold working. The Chachapoya were skilled craftspeople who created intricate jewelry, ceremonial objects, and practical tools. They also developed advanced textile techniques, producing fabrics with complex patterns and dyes that have retained their colors for centuries in the high-altitude environment. The mystery of Kuelap extends beyond its physical remains to questions about the broader Chachapoya civilization. How did they develop such advanced building techniques in such a challenging environment? What was the nature of their political organization that allowed them to coordinate such massive construction projects? How did they sustain a population large enough to build and defend multiple mountain fortresses across their territory? As we continue to study Khoelap, each answer seems to generate new questions. The city stands as a testament to human adaptability and ingenuity, proving that even in the world's most challenging environments, civilizations can not only survive, but create monuments that endure for centuries. Yet it also reminds us how much we still don't know about our past, how many stories remain untold in the ruins scattered across our planet. The warriors of the clouds left us more than just stone walls and underground chambers. They left us a mystery that continues to unfold, revealing new secrets about a remarkable people who chose to build their greatest achievement not in comfortable valleys or coastal plains, but high in the clouds, where they could touch the sky and guard their secrets from the world below. Far from the misty mountains of Peru, in the sun-scorched deserts of Jordan, another lost city tells a different story of human ambition and ultimate abandonment. Petra, the rose-red city carved from living rock, stands as perhaps the most visually stunning example of a civilization that mastered its harsh environment before mysteriously fading into legend. The Nabateans who created Petra were not builders in the conventional sense. They were sculptors on an impossible scale, carving entire buildings, temples, and tombs directly into the multicolored sandstone cliffs of southern Jordan. Walking through the narrow canyon known as the Sick, visitors today experience the same sense of wonder and anticipation that must have struck ancient travelers as they approached this hidden metropolis. What made the Nabateans truly remarkable wasn't just their artistic vision, but their mastery of desert survival. In one of the world's most arid regions, they created a thriving commercial empire that controlled trade routes connecting Arabia, Egypt, and the Mediterranean world. They were the middlemen of the ancient world, facilitating the exchange of frankincense, myrrh, spices, and silk that flowed between East and West. The key to Nabatean success lay in their revolutionary approach to water management. In a landscape where water is more precious than gold, they developed sophisticated systems for collecting, storing, and distributing every precious drop. They carved elaborate channels and cisterns into the rock faces, designed to capture the brief but intense rainfall that occasionally blessed the desert. Their understanding of hydraulic engineering rivaled that of the Romans, though their techniques were adapted specifically for desert conditions. Petra's most famous monument, the Treasury or Al-Khazneh, showcases the Nabateans' artistic mastery. This elaborate facade, carved directly into the cliff face, stands nearly 130 feet tall and features intricate Hellenistic decorative elements blended with local architectural traditions. Despite its popular name, the treasury likely served as a royal tomb rather than a repository for wealth, though local legends persist about hidden treasures concealed within its carved chambers. But the treasury represents just a fraction of Petra's architectural wonders. The city contains over 800 carved monuments, including elaborate tombs, ceremonial halls, churches, and residential complexes. The monastery, perched high on a mountain peak, rivals the treasury in grandeur and exceeds it in scale. The Roman theatre, carved into the hillside, could accommodate thousands of spectators for performances and civic gatherings. What made Petra truly special wasn't just individual monuments, but the way the entire city was integrated into the natural landscape. The Nabateans didn't simply carve buildings into rock faces. They created a comprehensive urban environment that worked with the desert terrain rather than against it. Streets followed natural contours, buildings were positioned to take advantage of prevailing winds for cooling, and the entire city was designed to funnel precious rainwater into storage systems. The Nabatean kingdom reached its peak during the first centuries BCE and CE, when Petra served as a wealthy capital controlling crucial trade routes. Caravans carrying goods from India, China, and southern Arabia would stop in Petra to rest, resupply, and pay taxes to the Nabatean authorities. The city became a cosmopolitan center where merchants, diplomats, and travelers from across the known world mingled in markets filled with exotic goods and precious commodities. Yet for all their success, the Nabateans left behind relatively few written records. Most of what we know about them comes from archaeological evidence and accounts by foreign visitors like the Greek geographer Strabo. This scarcity of documentation adds to Petra's mystery, forcing us to interpret their civilization through the monuments they carved and the artifacts they left behind. The decline of Petra began gradually in the 2nd century CE, accelerating after the Roman annexation of the Nabatean kingdom in 106 CE. Roman control brought changes to trade patterns as new routes developed that bypassed traditional Nabatean strongholds. The rise of Palmyra as a competing trade center further eroded Petra's economic foundation. Perhaps more significantly, changing maritime technology made sea routes increasingly attractive compared to overland caravan travel. Ships could carry larger cargoes more efficiently than camel caravans, and Roman control of the Mediterranean made sea travel relatively safe. The spice and incense trade that had made Petra wealthy began flowing through Red Sea ports rather than overland through the Jordanian desert. Environmental factors may have contributed to Petra's decline as well. The sophisticated water management systems that made life possible in the desert required constant maintenance and occasional upgrading. As the city's population declined and tax revenues decreased, maintaining these complex hydraulic networks became increasingly difficult. Without adequate water supplies, Petra could not sustain a large urban population. A devastating earthquake in 363 CE dealt another blow to the already struggling city. Many buildings were damaged or destroyed, and the reduced population lacked the resources to undertake major reconstruction efforts. While Petra never became completely abandoned, it gradually transformed from a major commercial center to a small provincial town, and eventually to little more than a Bedouin camping ground. The rediscovery of Petra by the Western world came through the Swiss explorer Johann Ludwig Burckhardt in 1812. Disguised as an Arab merchant and calling himself Ibrahim ibn Abdallah, Burckhardt convinced local Bedouins to guide him to the lost city, becoming the first European to document Petra's magnificent monuments. His detailed descriptions and sketches introduced the world to this architectural marvel that had been hidden in the Jordanian desert for centuries. What makes Petra's story particularly poignant is how completely it had vanished from Western consciousness. Medieval European maps and travel accounts contain no mention of this once great city. Even the Crusaders who established kingdoms throughout the region seem to have been unaware of the magnificent ruins hidden in the desert canyons. Petra had become truly lost, known only to local Bedouin tribes who used its caves and carved chambers for shelter. Modern archaeological work continues to reveal new aspects of Nabatean civilization and Petra's role as their capital. Recent discoveries include elaborate garden and pool complexes that demonstrate the Nabatean success in creating green spaces, even in the heart of the desert. Advanced dating techniques have pushed back the timeline of Petra's occupation, showing that the site was significant well before the classical Nabatean period. Perhaps most remarkably, new technologies are revealing hidden aspects of familiar monuments. Ground-penetrating radar and 3D imaging have shown that many of Petra's carved facades conceal complex internal structures, including chambers and passages that remain unexplored. The famous treasury, for example, appears to have additional rooms and corridors that archaeologists are only beginning to investigate. The story of Petra reminds us that even the most successful civilizations are vulnerable to changing circumstances beyond their control. The Nabateans created a remarkable society perfectly adapted to their harsh environment, built magnificent monuments that have endured for 2 millennia, and established trade networks that connected continents. Yet they could not adapt quickly enough when the world changed around them, when new technologies and political realities made their specialized expertise less valuable. Today, Petra stands as both a testament to human ingenuity and a reminder of impermanence. Its rose-red facades continue to inspire wonder in visitors from around the world, while archaeologists work to uncover new secrets hidden in its carved chambers and underground passages. The lost city that was found continues to yield surprises, proving that even our most studied ancient sites still have stories to tell. Across the vast expanses of our planet, hidden beneath layers of time and earth, lie remnants of civilizations that once commanded respect, wealth, and power. These aren't merely archaeological curiosities gathering dust in forgotten corners of the world. They're windows into human ambition, ingenuity, and the eternal struggle against forces beyond our control. In the windswept highlands of Turkey, where the earth itself seems to hold secrets, lies the ancient city of Çatalhöyük. Dating back nearly 9,000 years, this Neolithic settlement challenges everything we thought we knew about early urban life. Unlike our modern conception of cities with streets and separate buildings, Çatalhöyük was constructed as one massive, interconnected structure where thousands of people lived literally on top of each other. Imagine a city where there were no streets at all, where people entered their homes through holes in the roof, climbing down ladders into rooms that shared walls with their neighbors, where the dead were buried beneath the floors of the living, creating a literal foundation of ancestors. This wasn't primitive construction born of ignorance, but a sophisticated response to the harsh realities of life on the Anatolian plateau. The people of Çatalhöyük lived in a world where cooperation wasn't just beneficial, it was essential for survival. Their interconnected architecture reflected their interconnected society. Families shared walls, resources, and responsibilities in ways that modern urban planners can barely comprehend. They developed advanced techniques for food storage, creating granaries that could sustain the population through harsh winters and periodic droughts. What makes Çatalhöyük particularly fascinating is its apparent lack of social hierarchy. Archaeological evidence suggests a remarkably egalitarian society, where wealth and status were distributed relatively evenly. Houses were similar in size and construction, grave goods were comparable across the population, and there's little evidence of the monumental architecture typically associated with ruling elites. This was a civilization that succeeded through collective effort rather than centralized authority. The artwork discovered at Çatalhöyük reveals a people deeply connected to their environment and spiritual beliefs. Wall paintings depict elaborate hunting scenes, geometric patterns, and mysterious figures that might represent deities or shamanic visions. The famous leopard shrine shows prowling big cats rendered with remarkable artistic skill, suggesting these Neolithic people possessed sophisticated aesthetic sensibilities alongside their practical innovations. Yet for all their apparent success, Çatalhöyük eventually faced the same fate as so many other ancient cities. After flourishing for over 1,000 years, the settlement was gradually abandoned. The reasons remain unclear, though climate change, resource depletion, and social upheaval all likely played roles. What's certain is that by around 6,000 BCE, this remarkable experiment in urban living had come to an end. The mystery of Çatalhöyük's abandonment is compounded by what happened next. Rather than simply walking away, the final inhabitants seem to have deliberately sealed their city. They filled rooms with clay, blocked passages, and covered wall paintings, as if trying to preserve their legacy for some future discovery. This wasn't the panicked flight of refugees, but a careful, ritualistic closure that suggests the abandonment was planned and meaningful. Moving from the highlands of Turkey to the forests of Cambodia, we encounter another lost city that defied the limitations of its environment. Angkor, the magnificent capital of the Khmer Empire, represents one of history's most ambitious urban planning projects. At its peak in the 12th century, Angkor was the largest city in the world, home to over 1 million people spread across an area larger than modern New York City. The builders of Angkor didn't simply adapt to their environment, they transformed it entirely. In a region prone to seasonal flooding and drought, they created an elaborate hydraulic system that turned natural disadvantages into the foundation of imperial power. Massive reservoirs, called barrays, collected monsoon rainwater, while an intricate network of canals distributed it throughout the urban area. This wasn't just infrastructure, it was a statement of dominance over nature itself. Angkor Wat, the most famous of the city's monuments, showcases the Khmer ability to think on a truly grand scale. This temple complex covers over 400 acres and required an estimated 300,000 workers and 6,000 elephants to construct. Its 5 central towers represent Mount Meru, the center of the universe in Hindu cosmology, while its galleries contain the longest continuous bas-relief in the world, depicting epic battles between gods and demons. But Angkor Wat was just one jewel in a crown of architectural marvels. The Bayon Temple, with its massive carved faces gazing serenely in all directions, demonstrates the Khmer mastery of both engineering and artistic expression. Ta Prohm, left partially unrestored, shows how quickly the jungle can reclaim even the most monumental human creations, with massive tree roots growing through and around ancient stone walls. The scale of Angkor's achievements becomes even more impressive when we consider the logistics involved. Every stone used in construction had to be quarried from distant mountains and transported by river and elephant caravan. The sandstone blocks were fitted together with such precision that many joints remained tight after 8 centuries, despite earthquakes, wars, and the relentless pressure of tropical vegetation. The Khmer Empire's wealth came from its control of trade routes between China and India, but also from its revolutionary agricultural techniques. The hydraulic systems that supplied Angkor's population also enabled intensive rice cultivation that could support unprecedented population densities. Farmers could grow multiple crops per year, generating surpluses that funded the construction of temples and the maintenance of vast armies. Yet this apparent paradise contained the seeds of its own destruction. The elaborate water management systems that made Angkor possible also made it vulnerable. As the climate changed in the 14th and 15th centuries, bringing more erratic rainfall patterns, maintaining the hydraulic infrastructure became increasingly difficult and expensive. Reservoirs silted up, canals became clogged, and the delicate balance between human engineering and natural forces began to collapse. Political factors accelerated Angkor's decline. The rise of the Thai kingdoms to the west created new military pressures, just as internal conflicts weakened the Khmer state. The shift of trade routes to maritime passages reduced the economic advantages of Angkor's strategic location. Most significantly, the adoption of Theravada Buddhism changed the cultural foundation of Khmer society, reducing support for the massive temple construction projects that had defined the empire. The abandonment of Angkor wasn't sudden or complete. The city gradually transformed from an imperial capital to a religious center, then to a collection of villages scattered among increasingly overgrown ruins. By the time French explorers reached the site in the 19th century, the jungle had reclaimed most of the city, leaving only a few major temples visible above the green canopy. What makes Angkor's story particularly compelling is how completely it had vanished from historical consciousness. Medieval Chinese records mention the wealth and power of the Khmer Empire, but European maps from the colonial period show only empty forest where Angkor once stood. Local Cambodian knowledge preserved some awareness of the ruins, but the full scope of the ancient city remained hidden until systematic archaeological surveys began in the 20th century. Modern technology continues to reveal new secrets about Angkor's extent and complexity. Laser scanning from aircraft has identified previously unknown temples, roads, and residential areas stretching far beyond the central temple complexes. These discoveries suggest that Angkor was even larger and more sophisticated than previously imagined, with suburban areas, industrial zones, and agricultural districts that supported the urban core. The story of Angkor reminds us that even the most successful civilizations must constantly adapt to changing circumstances. The Khmer created a remarkable society that lasted for 6 centuries, built monuments that still inspire awe, and developed technologies that modern engineers study with admiration. Yet they could not overcome the combination of environmental challenges, political pressures, and cultural changes that ultimately made their way of life unsustainable. Today, Angkor serves as both a tourist destination and an ongoing archaeological laboratory. Scholars continue to decipher inscriptions, map previously unknown structures, and develop new theories about how this remarkable civilization functioned. The lost city that was found continues to teach us about human achievement and human vulnerability, about the possibilities and limitations of urban life in challenging environments. As we explore these ancient ruins, we're reminded that every civilization, no matter how powerful or sophisticated, exists in dialogue with forces beyond its control. Climate, politics, economics, and culture all play roles in determining which cities thrive and which fade into legend. The lost cities we've discovered so far represent just a fraction of human urban experiments, each one a unique response to the eternal challenges of survival, cooperation, and meaning in an uncertain world. In the remote highlands of Bolivia, where the air grows thin and the landscape stretches endlessly toward distant peaks, lies one of South America's most enigmatic archaeological sites. Tiwanaku, known to locals as Tiahuanaco, challenges our understanding of what ancient civilizations could achieve at altitudes that test the limits of human endurance. At over 12,000 feet above sea level, Tiwanaku sits higher than most commercial aircraft fly. The very act of building a major city at such altitude seems almost impossible, yet here stand the remnants of a civilization that not only survived, but thrived in conditions that would challenge modern technology. The thin air contains 40% less oxygen than at sea level, making physical labor exhausting and complex construction projects seemingly insurmountable. The people who built Tiwanaku weren't deterred by these challenges. Instead, they created one of the most sophisticated urban centers in the pre-Columbian Americas. Their city featured massive stone pyramids, elaborate ceremonial complexes, and precision-cut megalithic structures that demonstrate engineering capabilities that archaeologists are still trying to fully understand. The Akapana Pyramid dominates the site, a stepped monument that rises nearly 60 feet above the surrounding plain. Unlike Egyptian pyramids built from solid stone, the Akapana was constructed as a complex hydraulic system. Its interior contains a network of channels and chambers designed to manipulate water flow in ways that still puzzle engineers today. During Bolivia's rainy season, water would cascade down the pyramid's sides in carefully controlled patterns, creating dramatic visual effects while serving unknown ceremonial or practical purposes. Perhaps even more impressive is the precision stonework found throughout Tiwanaku. The famous Sun Gate, carved from a single block of andesite weighing over 10 tons, features intricate reliefs depicting figures and symbols, whose meanings remain largely mysterious. The level of detail achieved in this hard volcanic stone suggests tools and techniques far more sophisticated than the simple copper and bronze implements found at the site. The megalithic structures at Tiwanaku demonstrate a mastery of stone cutting that rivals anything achieved by ancient civilizations worldwide. Massive blocks weighing hundreds of tons were shaped with mathematical precision and fitted together so perfectly that even today, centuries after construction, it's impossible to slip a knife blade between the joints. Some stones feature complex interlocking shapes that would challenge modern stonemasons using power tools. What makes these achievements even more remarkable is the logistics involved in transporting materials to the site. The massive stones used in Tiwanaku's construction came from quarries located many miles away, including some from across Lake Titicaca. Moving multi-ton blocks across water and up steep mountain paths would have required engineering solutions that we can only guess at today. The civilization that built Tiwanaku flourished for over a millennium, from roughly 300 to 1000 CE. At its peak, the city controlled trade networks that stretched across much of western South America, facilitating the exchange of goods between coastal, highland, and jungle regions. Their influence extended far beyond their mountain stronghold, with Tiwanaku artistic styles and architectural techniques appearing in sites hundreds of miles away. The Tiwanaku people developed sophisticated agricultural techniques adapted to their harsh environment. They created raised field systems called waru that maximized crop yields despite the challenges of high altitude, frost, and unpredictable rainfall. These agricultural innovations allowed them to support a substantial urban population in one of the world's most challenging environments. Their understanding of astronomy was equally impressive. The Kalasasaya temple complex contains precisely positioned stone pillars that align with celestial events, creating an ancient observatory that tracked the movements of sun, moon, and stars with remarkable accuracy. This astronomical knowledge was likely crucial for their agricultural calendar, helping farmers know when to plant and harvest crops in a climate where timing meant the difference between abundance and starvation. Yet despite their obvious achievements, the Tiwanaku civilization remains largely mysterious. They left behind no decipherable written records, forcing archaeologists to piece together their story from architectural remains, artwork, and burial practices. Their religious beliefs, political organization, and daily life must be inferred from fragmentary evidence that often raises more questions than it answers. The decline of Tiwanaku appears to have been gradual, occurring over several centuries rather than through sudden catastrophe. Climate data suggests that the region experienced increasing drought conditions during the 10th and 11th centuries, which may have undermined the agricultural systems that supported the city's population. As crop yields declined, the trade networks that brought wealth to Tiwanaku may have shifted to more reliable suppliers elsewhere. Political fragmentation likely accelerated the city's decline. As central authority weakened, regional centers may have asserted independence, reducing the tribute and labor that had funded Tiwanaku's monumental construction projects. Without the resources to maintain their complex infrastructure, the systems that made urban life possible at such altitude gradually broke down. By the time the Inca Empire expanded into the region several centuries later, Tiwanaku had already been largely abandoned. Inca legends spoke of the ruins as the work of giants or gods, suggesting that even indigenous peoples had lost clear memories of who had built these monuments. The Spanish conquistadors, who eventually reached the site, were equally baffled, unable to believe that indigenous Americans could have achieved such sophisticated stonework. The mystery deepened with modern archaeological investigation. Radiocarbon dating revealed that Tiwanaku was far older than previously believed, pushing back the timeline of advanced civilization in South America by centuries. The sophistication of the site's architecture and engineering suggested technological capabilities that seemed inconsistent with the simple tools found during excavation. Recent discoveries continue to add layers to Tiwanaku's mystery. Ground-penetrating radar has revealed extensive underground structures that remain unexcavated. Satellite imagery has identified field systems and settlements extending far beyond the main ceremonial center, suggesting that Tiwanaku's influence covered a much larger area than previously recognized. The acoustics of Tiwanaku's ceremonial spaces present another intriguing puzzle. The stone structures were designed to amplify and manipulate sound in sophisticated ways, creating acoustic effects that would have enhanced religious ceremonies or public gatherings. Some researchers suggest that these acoustic properties were intentionally engineered, demonstrating an understanding of sound physics that wouldn't be matched in the Western world for centuries. Water played a central role in Tiwanaku's design, not just for practical purposes, but apparently for symbolic and ceremonial reasons as well. The entire site was designed to channel and control water flow, creating fountains, pools, and cascades throughout the urban area. This manipulation of water at such high altitude, where it freezes regularly and evaporation is rapid, represents another remarkable engineering achievement. The artistic legacy of Tiwanaku reveals a civilization with sophisticated aesthetic sensibilities and complex symbolic systems. Their textiles, pottery, and metalwork display intricate designs that combine geometric patterns with stylized representations of humans, animals, and supernatural beings. The recurring motifs suggest a coherent religious or mythological system, though its specific meanings remain largely opaque to modern scholars. What makes Tiwanaku particularly fascinating is how it challenges our assumptions about the development of complex civilizations. Most early urban centers developed in river valleys or coastal areas with favorable climates and abundant resources. Tiwanaku succeeded in conditions that would challenge even modern cities, suggesting that human adaptability and ingenuity can overcome seemingly impossible environmental constraints. The site continues to yield new insights about ancient South American civilization. Recent excavations have uncovered evidence of sophisticated metallurgy, advanced mathematics, and complex social organization. Each discovery adds to our understanding of what the Tiwanaku people achieved, while simultaneously highlighting how much about their civilization remains unknown. Today, Tiwanaku stands as a testament to human determination and creativity in the face of overwhelming challenges. The massive stones still fit together perfectly after 1,000 years. The astronomical alignments still function with precision, and the acoustic effects still amaze visitors who experience them firsthand. This lost city reminds us that our ancestors were capable of achievements that continue to inspire and humble us, even as they raise questions about the true extent of ancient human knowledge and capability. The wind that blows across the Bolivian Altiplano carries whispers of secrets that may never be fully understood. In the shadow of Tiwanaku's ancient monuments, we're reminded that human civilization has always been more complex, more sophisticated, and more mysterious than we dare to imagine. In the heart of Cambodia's jungle, where ancient stones emerge from tangles of roots and vines, we encounter a different kind of mystery entirely. Bantai Chma, a temple complex that rivals Angkor Wat in scale and surpasses it in enigma, tells the story of a civilization that built monuments not just for the living, but for memories that would outlast empires. This isn't just another Khmer temple lost to time. Bantai Chma represents something more profound, a deliberate attempt to capture and preserve a moment of triumph that its builders somehow knew was fleeting. Constructed in the late 12th century during the reign of Jayavarman VII, the complex was designed as both fortress and memorial, celebrating military victories while serving as a spiritual stronghold against forces both earthly and divine. Walking through Bantai Chma today, you're struck by the intentional grandeur of its conception. The outer wall stretches for nearly 2 miles, enclosing an area that could house a substantial town. Within these boundaries, elaborate temples rise from carefully planned courtyards, their walls covered in bas-reliefs that tell stories of battles fought and gods appeased. Every surface seems to carry meaning. Every carving serves a purpose in some grand narrative that we can only partially decipher. The scale of construction here defies easy explanation. We're talking about moving millions of sandstone blocks, each weighing hundreds of pounds, to a remote location far from the main population centers of the Khmer Empire. The precision required to fit these blocks together without mortar, creating structures that have withstood 8 centuries of monsoons, earthquakes, and jungle growth, suggests engineering capabilities that modern construction companies would struggle to match. What sets Bantai Chma apart from other Khmer monuments isn't just its size or craftsmanship, but the story it was built to tell. The temple's bas-reliefs don't depict generic religious scenes or mythological battles. They show specific historical events, real people engaged in actual conflicts. These walls serve as stone newspapers, recording the triumphs of Jayavarman VII's armies against the Cham invaders who had previously sacked Angkor itself. The level of detail in these historical records is extraordinary. Individual soldiers are shown with distinct facial features and equipment. Naval battles are depicted with accurate representations of different types of boats and fighting techniques. The artists who carve these scenes weren't working from imagination, but from direct observation or detailed accounts from participants in the events they immortalized. Yet for all its historical specificity, Banteay Chmar was abandoned relatively quickly after its completion. Within a century or two, the jungle began its relentless advance, swallowing buildings and toppling walls. By the time French explorers reached the site in the late 19th century, it had become a romantic ruin, its courtyards filled with fallen stones, and its galleries echoing only with the calls of tropical birds. The reasons for this abandonment mirror the broader collapse of the Khmer Empire, but they also reflect something more specific to Banteay Chmar's unique purpose. This was a monument built to commemorate specific victories and honor particular individuals. When those victories became distant memories and those individuals passed into legend, the temple's primary function was fulfilled. Unlike religious centers that could adapt to changing beliefs, memorial complexes like Banteay Chmar had more limited lifespans. Environmental factors played their role as well. The hydraulic systems that made large-scale construction possible in this region required constant maintenance. As the empire's resources became stretched thin by external threats and internal conflicts, maintaining remote temple complexes became increasingly difficult. When the water management systems failed, the communities that supported places like Banteay Chmar could no longer sustain themselves. The story becomes even more poignant when we consider what happened to the site during the 20th century. Unlike the famous temples of Angkor, which were protected by their UNESCO World Heritage status, Banteay Chmar suffered extensive looting during Cambodia's troubled modern history. Entire walls of irreplaceable bas-reliefs were cut into portable sections and smuggled out to feed the international art market. Recent conservation efforts have focused not just on preserving what remains, but on documenting what has been lost. Archaeologists work with old photographs and detailed drawings to reconstruct the original appearance of damaged sections. They've also made disturbing discoveries about the extent of the looting, finding evidence that some of the most significant historical scenes were deliberately targeted and removed. The challenge of conserving Banteay Chmar highlights a broader problem facing archaeological sites worldwide. How do you protect monuments that are simultaneously too valuable to ignore and too remote to guard effectively? The temple's isolation, which helped preserve it from earlier destruction, made it vulnerable to modern threats. The very jungle that concealed it from casual visitors also provided cover for those who came to strip away its treasures. Modern technology is revealing new secrets about Banteay Chmar's original design and construction. Ground-penetrating radar has identified buried structures and hidden chambers that may contain additional historical records or religious artifacts. Laser scanning is creating precise digital models that will preserve the temple's current state for future generations, even if physical deterioration continues. The acoustic properties of the temple spaces suggest that sound played an important role in whatever ceremonies took place here. Like many Khmer monuments, Banteay Chmar was designed to amplify and focus sound in specific ways, creating dramatic effects that would have enhanced religious or commemorative rituals. Standing in certain courtyards, you can still experience these acoustic phenomena, hearing your voice transformed and projected in ways that ancient builders intended. Water management at Banteay Chmar reveals another layer of the site's sophistication. The complex included elaborate systems for collecting, storing, and distributing water during both wet and dry seasons. These weren't just practical necessities, but integral parts of the temple's symbolic program. Water represented purification, renewal, and the divine power that legitimized royal authority. The astronomical alignments built into Banteay Chamar's layout demonstrate the Khmer understanding of celestial cycles and their integration with earthly events. Certain doorways and windows frame specific stars or constellations at particular times of year, connecting the memorial function of the temple with cosmic rhythms that transcended individual human lives. Perhaps most remarkably, recent archaeological work has uncovered evidence of the construction process itself. Tool marks on stones reveal the techniques used to shape and position massive blocks. Temporary structures and work areas show how the builders organized their massive labor force. These glimpses into the actual construction process help us understand not just what was built, but how it was accomplished. The mystery of Banteay Chamar extends beyond its physical remains to questions about the society that created it. How did the Khmer Empire mobilize the resources necessary for such ambitious projects, while simultaneously fighting wars and managing a complex agricultural system? What motivated communities to invest enormous effort in monuments that served primarily ceremonial purposes? How did they coordinate the work of thousands of craftsmen, laborers, and artists across multiple decades of construction? These questions become more pressing when we consider that Banteay Chamar was just one of dozens of major temple complexes built during Jayavarman VII's reign. The scale of construction activity across the empire during this period suggests a level of organizational capacity and economic productivity that challenges our understanding of medieval Southeast Asian societies. The abandonment of Banteay Chamar also raises questions about how civilizations choose to remember and forget their past. The temple was built to ensure that specific historical events would never be forgotten, yet within a few generations, it had been abandoned to the jungle. The very permanence of stone that was meant to guarantee eternal memory became a burden when maintaining these monuments required resources that could be better used elsewhere. Today, as conservation efforts continue and new discoveries emerge from ongoing archaeological work, Banteay Chamar stands as a reminder of both human ambition and human vulnerability. Its massive walls and intricate carvings testify to what can be achieved when entire societies commit to monumental undertakings. Yet its current state of partial ruin reminds us that even the most carefully planned attempts at immortality are subject to forces beyond human control. The jungle continues its slow work of reclamation, roots working between stone blocks and vines climbing over carved faces. But each season also brings new visitors who experience the same sense of awe that the temple's builders intended to inspire. In this ongoing dialogue between past and present, between human ambition and natural process, Banteay Chamar continues to serve its original purpose as a place where memory and meaning intersect with the eternal rhythms of the natural world. Moving from the humid jungles of Southeast Asia to the arid landscapes of Central Asia, we encounter a very different type of lost city, one that challenges our understanding of how civilizations adapt to extreme environments. Merv, once known as the Queen of the World, stood at the crossroads of the Silk Road for over a millennium, growing wealthy from the caravans that stopped to rest, trade, and resupply in its markets and caravanserais. In the heart of what is now Turkmenistan, where summer temperatures regularly exceed 120 degrees Fahrenheit, and water is more precious than gold, the people of Merv created one of the largest cities in the medieval world. At its peak in the 12th century, Merv may have housed over 1 million inhabitants, making it larger than contemporary London or Paris. This wasn't just survival in a harsh environment, it was prosperity on an almost unimaginable scale. The secret to Merv's success lay in its mastery of irrigation technology. The city's engineers diverted water from the Murgab River through an intricate network of canals, underground channels, and reservoirs that transformed a desert oasis into agricultural land capable of feeding a massive urban population. These weren't simple ditches dug in the sand, but sophisticated hydraulic systems that required precise engineering and constant maintenance. The Qanat system used at Merv represents one of humanity's most ingenious solutions to the problem of water scarcity. Underground channels carried water from distant highland sources to the city, using gravity flow and careful gradient calculation to deliver precious liquid across dozens of miles of desert terrain. The construction and maintenance of these systems required specialized knowledge passed down through generations of master engineers. What made Merv particularly remarkable wasn't just its size, but its cultural sophistication. The city served as a major center of learning, housing libraries that preserved Greek, Persian, Arab, and Central Asian texts during periods when much of this knowledge was being lost elsewhere. Scholars from across the known world came to study at Merv's academies, contributing to advances in mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and philosophy. The city's architecture reflected its cosmopolitan character and enormous wealth. Massive walls enclosed residential districts, commercial areas, and industrial zones spread across multiple square miles. The Great Mosque of Merv, with its towering minaret and elaborate tilework, could accommodate thousands of worshippers during major religious festivals. Palaces and public buildings displayed architectural influences from across the Islamic world, creating a unique synthesis of styles that reflected the city's position at the center of international trade networks. Merv's markets were legendary throughout the medieval world. Caravans arriving from China would find goods from India, Persia, and the Mediterranean world already waiting in the city's bazaars. Local craftsmen produced textiles, metalwork, and pottery that were prized from Constantinople to Beijing. The city's merchants developed sophisticated financial instruments and credit systems that facilitated long-distance trade across political and cultural boundaries. The diversity of Merv's population matched its economic complexity. The city housed Muslims, Christians, Buddhists, and followers of various other faiths, all finding ways to coexist in pursuit of commercial and scholarly opportunities. This religious tolerance wasn't just philosophical idealism, but practical necessity for a city that depended on international trade and cultural exchange. Yet for all its apparent strength and prosperity, Merv was vulnerable to forces beyond its control. The city's wealth made it a tempting target for military campaigns, while its dependence on delicate irrigation systems made it susceptible to both natural disasters and deliberate sabotage. Its location at the center of trade networks that brought prosperity also exposed it to political upheavals that could disrupt commerce and threaten the city's economic foundation. The end came suddenly and catastrophically in 1221, when Mongol armies under Tolui Khan besieged and captured the city. Contemporary accounts describe a massacre of unprecedented scale, with hundreds of thousands of inhabitants killed and the city's infrastructure systematically destroyed. The irrigation systems that had made urban life possible were deliberately sabotaged, ensuring that Merv could not quickly recover from the devastation. The Mongol destruction of Merv wasn't just military conquest, it was environmental warfare. By destroying the Qanat systems and filling in canals, the attackers transformed fertile agricultural land back into desert. Without water, the survivors could not rebuild their city or sustain large populations. The Queen of the World became a collection of ruins scattered across an increasingly arid landscape. What makes Merv's story particularly tragic is how completely the city disappeared from historical consciousness. Within a few generations, travelers passing through the region found only scattered ruins and local legends about a once great city. The sophisticated urban civilization that had flourished here for centuries left behind only fragments of walls and the remains of irrigation channels slowly being buried by shifting sand. Modern archaeological work is gradually revealing the true scale of what was lost when Merv was destroyed. Satellite imagery shows the extent of the ancient irrigation systems, revealing agricultural areas that once supported hundreds of thousands of people. Excavations in the city's ruins have uncovered evidence of industries, institutions, and cultural achievements that rivaled anything in the medieval world. The preservation challenges at Merv are enormous. Unlike stone cities that leave substantial ruins, Merv was built primarily from sun-dried brick that gradually dissolves back into the earth when not maintained. The same desert environment that helped preserve some organic materials through desiccation also creates sandstorms that steadily erode exposed structures. Recent discoveries at Merv continue to surprise archaeologists. Underground chambers have yielded libraries of medieval manuscripts, some containing unique copies of texts lost elsewhere. Industrial areas show evidence of technological innovations in metalworking, textile production, and ceramic manufacture. Residential districts reveal details about daily life in one of the world's largest medieval cities. The Kennet systems that once sustained Merv represent engineering achievements that modern development projects struggle to match. These underground channels required precise surveying, expert construction, and coordinated maintenance across vast distances. The knowledge needed to build and operate such systems represented generations of accumulated expertise that was lost when the city was destroyed. Climate data suggests that Merv's destruction came at a time when the region was already facing environmental stress. Changing weather patterns were reducing river flows and making irrigation more challenging just as the city reached its maximum population. The Mongol invasion may have delivered the final blow to a civilization already struggling with resource constraints. The international character of Merv's destruction reflects the city's global importance. The Mongol decision to systematically destroy rather than simply occupy the city suggests they understood that Merv's wealth and influence posed a long-term threat to their empire. By eliminating not just the population, but the infrastructure that made urban life possible, they ensured that this center of resistance could not re-emerge. Today, the ruins of Merv stretch across a landscape that gives little indication of the vibrant city that once stood here. Scattered walls and the remains of major buildings mark what was once one of the world's great urban centers. The silence of the desert has replaced the bustling sounds of markets, schools, and workshops that once made this one of humanity's most dynamic cities. The story of Merv reminds us how quickly even the most successful civilizations can be erased when the delicate systems that sustain them are disrupted. The city's engineers and administrators created a remarkable urban environment in one of the world's most challenging locations, supporting a population and level of cultural achievement that wouldn't be matched in the region for centuries after its destruction. As archaeological work continues and new technologies reveal previously unknown aspects of the site, Merv serves as both an inspiration and a warning. It demonstrates what human ingenuity can accomplish even in the harshest environments, while reminding us that our greatest achievements remain vulnerable to forces beyond our control. In the shifting sands of the Turkmen Desert, the Queen of the World keeps her secrets, waiting for patient scholars to piece together the fragments of a lost golden age. Deep in the windswept steppes of Kazakhstan, where the horizon stretches endlessly in all directions, and the silence is broken only by the whisper of grass in the eternal wind, lie the remains of a civilization that defied every expectation about nomadic life. Otrar, once known as Farab, stood as a testament to what could be achieved when trade, culture, and strategic location converged in perfect harmony. This wasn't just another trading post along the Silk Road. Otrar was a jewel of medieval Central Asia, a city that bridged worlds and cultures with an elegance that belied its harsh surroundings. For over 8 centuries, from roughly the 8th to the 16th century, this oasis settlement grew from a modest fortress into one of the most important commercial and intellectual centers between East and West. The genius of Otrar lay in its position at the confluence of major trade routes. Caravans traveling between China and Europe, between the Islamic world and the Russian principalities, all passed through this strategic location. But the city's founders understood that geography alone wouldn't guarantee success. They invested in infrastructure, culture, and learning, transforming what could have been merely a rest stop into a destination worthy of its own reputation. Walking through Otrar's ruins today you can still sense the careful planning that went into its construction. The city was laid out in concentric circles, with the citadel at its heart surrounded by residential districts, commercial quarters, and industrial areas. Massive walls protected the entire complex, while an intricate system of gates and passages controlled access to different sections of the city. This wasn't random growth, but deliberate urban design that reflected sophisticated understanding of both defensive strategy and commercial efficiency. The architectural achievements at Petra rival those of more famous Central Asian cities. The remains of the Aristan Bab mausoleum complex showcase the refinement of local building techniques, with elaborate brickwork and geometric patterns that demonstrate mathematical precision and artistic vision. The Great Mosque, though now reduced to foundation stones, once featured a minaret that served as a landmark visible for miles across the steppe. What made Petra truly special wasn't just its buildings, but the intellectual life that flourished within its walls. The city became renowned as a center of learning, attracting scholars, mathematicians, and philosophers from across the Islamic world. Its libraries housed manuscripts in Arabic, Persian, Turkic, and Chinese, making it a true crossroads of knowledge as well as commerce. The madrasas of Petra produced graduates who went on to serve in courts and universities, from Baghdad to Delhi. Perhaps most remarkably, Petra was the birthplace of Abu Nasr al-Farabi, known in the West as Alfarabius, one of the greatest philosophers of the medieval period. Al-Farabi's works on logic, ethics, and political philosophy influenced thinkers from Maimonides to Thomas Aquinas. That such a towering intellectual figure emerged from this remote steppe city speaks to the remarkable cultural sophistication that Petra achieved at its peak. The city's prosperity rested on more than just its position along trade routes. Petra's merchants and craftsmen developed reputations for quality and reliability that extended far beyond Central Asia. The city's textiles, metalwork, and leather goods were prized in markets from Constantinople to Beijing. Local agricultural innovations, including advanced irrigation systems that brought water from distant rivers, supported not just urban populations, but also the horses and camels that made long-distance trade possible. The social structure of Petra reflected its cosmopolitan character. The city housed Turkic nomads who had settled into urban life, Persian merchants and craftsmen, Arab scholars and religious figures, and Chinese traders who sometimes spent years away from their homeland. This diversity could have been a source of conflict, but Petra's rulers developed institutions and customs that channeled cultural differences into commercial and intellectual advantages. The city's defensive systems were as sophisticated as its commercial infrastructure. Multiple walls surrounded different districts, with the innermost citadel serving as a final refuge during sieges. Underground passages connected key buildings, while secret exits allowed defenders to launch surprise attacks or escape if the city fell. These weren't theoretical preparations. Petra faced numerous military threats throughout its history and survived most of them through careful preparation and strategic thinking. Trade in Petra operated according to complex but well-understood rules that governed everything from currency exchange to dispute resolution. The city developed some of the earliest known systems of commercial law in Central Asia, creating institutions that could handle transactions involving merchants from dozens of different cultures and legal traditions. These innovations spread along trade routes, influencing commercial practices across much of Asia. The religious life of Petra reflected the city's position at the intersection of different cultural worlds. While Islam became the dominant faith, the city maintained traditions of tolerance that allowed other religious communities to flourish. Buddhist merchants from China, Christian traders from Byzantium, and followers of various local traditions all found accommodation within Petra's walls. This wasn't just pragmatic tolerance, but a sophisticated understanding that diversity strengthened rather than weakened the urban community. Yet, Even as Otrar reached heights of prosperity and cultural achievement that few medieval cities could match, the seeds of its destruction were already being sown. The city's wealth and strategic importance made it a target for every ambitious ruler who sought to control Central Asian trade routes. Its location, which had been the foundation of its success, also made it vulnerable to the political upheavals that periodically swept across the steppes. The beginning of the end came in the early 13th century, when the expanding Mongol Empire began to threaten the established order of Central Asia. Otrar's governor, Inalchuk Kadir Khan, made a fateful decision that would doom his city and alter the course of world history. When Mongol merchants arrived in 1218, he accused them of being spies and ordered their execution, confiscating their valuable goods. This act of aggression provided Genghis Khan with the pretext he needed to launch his invasion of the Khwarezmian Empire, of which Otrar was a key city. The Mongol response was swift and devastating. In 1219, Mongol armies besieged Otrar with a ferocity that shocked even contemporary observers accustomed to the brutalities of medieval warfare. The siege lasted 5 months, but the outcome was never really in doubt. The fall of Otrar was catastrophic, not just for the city itself, but for the entire region. The Mongols systematically destroyed the irrigation systems that had made urban life possible in this arid environment. They demolished buildings, scattered populations, and eliminated the institutional knowledge that had sustained trade and learning for centuries. What had taken generations to build was undone in a matter of months. The destruction went beyond mere military conquest. The Mongols understood that Otrar's power came from its role as a commercial and cultural center, so they deliberately set out to eliminate not just the city but the networks that had sustained it. Trade routes were disrupted, scholarly communities scattered, and the delicate balance of relationships that had made peaceful commerce possible was shattered. Recovery from such devastation proved impossible. While some settlement continued at the site, the Otrar that re-emerged was a shadow of its former self. The international networks that had brought wealth and knowledge to the city had been permanently disrupted. The irrigation systems that had supported large populations lay in ruins, and the expertise needed to rebuild them had been lost with the destruction of the city's institutions. Subsequent centuries brought additional challenges. Political instability across Central Asia made long-distance trade increasingly dangerous and unpredictable. New maritime routes reduced the importance of overland passages, while the rise of powerful centralized states changed the political landscape in ways that favored different types of commercial centers. The world that had made Otrar's prosperity possible was disappearing even as the city struggled to rebuild. By the 16th century, Otrar had dwindled to little more than a village. The great walls crumbled, the magnificent buildings collapsed, and the libraries that had once housed thousands of manuscripts were empty. Travelers passing through the region found only ruins and local legends about a city that had once rivaled Samarkand and Bukhara in wealth and importance. The rediscovery of Otrar's significance came only in the 20th century, when Soviet archaeologists began systematic excavations of the site. What they found exceeded all expectations. The ruins revealed a city far larger and more sophisticated than historical records had suggested. Evidence of advanced urban planning, sophisticated crafts production, and extensive international trade painted a picture of medieval achievement that had been largely forgotten by the historical record. Modern archaeological techniques continue to reveal new aspects of Otrar's remarkable civilization. Ground-penetrating radar has identified structures still buried beneath centuries of accumulated soil and debris. Chemical analysis of artifacts reveals trade connections spanning thousands of miles, while architectural studies show influences from cultures across Asia and the Middle East. The preservation challenges at Otrar are enormous. The harsh steppe climate alternately bakes and freezes the exposed ruins, while wind erosion steadily wears away surfaces that have survived for centuries. The same remoteness that helps protect the site from modern development also makes conservation work logistically difficult and expensive. Recent discoveries include evidence of technological innovations that were centuries ahead of their time. Otra's craftsmen developed techniques for metalworking, textile production, and ceramic manufacture that weren't matched elsewhere in the region for generations after the city's destruction. These innovations spread along trade routes, influencing technological development across much of Asia. The astronomical knowledge preserved in Otra's scholarly institutions represents another lost treasure. The city's scholars made observations and calculations that contributed to the development of medieval astronomy and mathematics. Their work influenced later Islamic scholars, and through them, the European Renaissance. The destruction of Otra's libraries eliminated centuries of accumulated knowledge that can never be recovered. Perhaps most poignantly, archaeological evidence suggests that Otra was on the verge of even greater achievements when the Mongol invasion cut short its development. Building projects were underway that would have expanded the city's capacity and enhanced its cultural institutions. Scholarly work was progressing on problems that wouldn't be solved elsewhere for centuries. The city's destruction represents not just the loss of what was, but of what might have been. The story of Otra serves as a reminder of how quickly the achievements of civilization can be erased when the delicate systems that sustain them are disrupted. The city's merchants, scholars, and craftsmen created something remarkable in one of the world's most challenging environments, building institutions and relationships that benefited communities across continents. Yet all of this could be undone by a single act of political miscalculation and the military response it provoked. Today, as excavations continue and new technologies reveal previously unknown aspects of the site, Otra stands as both an archaeological treasure and a cautionary tale. Its ruins remind us that human achievement, no matter how impressive, remains vulnerable to forces beyond individual control. In the silence of the Kazakh steppe, where wind whispers through broken walls and scattered stones, the ghost of a great city continues to teach lessons about ambition, achievement, and the fragility of all human endeavors. The legacy of Otra extends far beyond its physical remains. The city's role as a bridge between cultures and civilizations influenced the development of trade, scholarship, and diplomacy across much of the medieval world. Its destruction marked a turning point in the history of Central Asia, ending an era of relative stability and cultural flowering that wouldn't be matched again for centuries. As we stand among the ruins of this once great city, we're reminded that the forces that created Otra, geography, trade, cultural exchange, and human ambition, continue to shape our world today. The questions raised by its rise and fall remain relevant. How do civilizations balance openness with security? What makes some cities resilient while others prove vulnerable? How do we preserve the achievements of the past while adapting to the challenges of the future? In the endless expanse of the steppe, where Otra once stood as a beacon of learning and prosperity, these questions echo across the centuries, waiting for new generations to discover their own answers in the dialogue between human ambition and the eternal forces that shape our destiny. Moving from the wind-swept steppes of Central Asia to the mysterious highlands of Ethiopia, we encounter a different kind of lost city entirely. Here, carved directly into volcanic rock at an altitude that leaves visitors breathless, lies Lalibela, a place that challenges our understanding of medieval engineering and religious devotion. Unlike cities that were built up from the ground, Lalibela was carved downward into the earth itself. Imagine the audacity of such an undertaking. Instead of quarrying stone and hauling it to a construction site, the builders of Lalibela worked in reverse, excavating massive churches directly from solid bedrock. The result is a complex of 11 monolithic churches, each one a masterpiece of stone carving that seems to defy the laws of physics and engineering. The man behind this extraordinary project was King Lalibela, who ruled Ethiopia in the late 12th and early 13th centuries. According to legend, he received divine visions instructing him to create a new Jerusalem in the Ethiopian highlands, a holy city that would serve as a pilgrimage destination for Christians unable to make the dangerous journey to the actual Jerusalem. What he created was far more than a simple copy. It was a theological statement carved in stone, a three-dimensional representation of Christian cosmology that continues to inspire wonder 8 centuries after its completion. The engineering challenges alone seem almost insurmountable. Working with hand tools in an era before mechanized construction, teams of stonemasons, architects, and laborers carved through solid volcanic rock to create structures that are both architecturally sophisticated and artistically magnificent. The Church of St. George, perhaps the most famous of Lalibela's monuments, was carved as a perfect Greek cross, its walls descending 60 feet below ground level. The precision required to create such symmetrical perfection while working in three-dimensional space stretches the limits of what we might expect from medieval craftsmen. But the technical achievements at Lalibela go far beyond simple excavation. The builders created sophisticated drainage systems to prevent flooding during Ethiopia's intense rainy seasons. They carved elaborate window patterns that provide both light and ventilation while creating dramatic visual effects as sunlight moves across the interior spaces throughout the day. Most remarkably, they connected the various churches through a complex network of tunnels and trenches that allow pilgrims to move between different worship spaces while remaining largely underground. The symbolism embedded in Lalibela's design reveals a civilization with profound theological sophistication. The entire complex is divided into 2 main groups representing heaven and earth, with the Jordan River symbolically flowing between them. Each church serves specific liturgical functions, with their positions and orientations carefully calculated to create a sacred landscape that tells the story of Christian salvation. This wasn't random construction, but a carefully planned urban environment designed to guide visitors through a spiritual journey from earthly concerns toward divine revelation. The workforce required for such an undertaking would have been enormous. Conservative estimates suggest that thousands of skilled craftsmen and laborers worked on the project over several decades. The logistics of feeding, housing, and coordinating such a massive workforce in a remote highland location represents an organizational achievement that rivals the engineering feat itself. Yet historical records provide few details about how this monumental project was actually accomplished. Local traditions fill some of these gaps with stories that blur the line between history and legend. Ethiopian Orthodox Christians believe that angels worked alongside human craftsmen, continuing the carving work at night after the humans had stopped for the day. While modern scholars might dismiss such accounts as folklore, they reflect the profound sense of wonder that Lalibela has inspired throughout its history. The precision and artistry of the work does seem to exceed what might be expected from purely human effort. The religious significance of Lalibela extended far beyond Ethiopia's borders. During the medieval period, when Christian access to Jerusalem was often restricted by Islamic control of the Holy Land, Lalibela served as an alternative pilgrimage destination for Christians throughout northeastern Africa and even from more distant lands. The city became a center of theological learning and artistic production, attracting scholars and craftsmen who contributed to Ethiopia's distinctive Christian culture. Yet even as Lalibela reached its peak as a religious center, forces beyond its control were beginning to threaten its existence. The expansion of Islamic powers in the region created military pressures that drained resources and disrupted the trade networks that brought wealth to the Ethiopian highlands. Climate change during the 14th and 15th centuries brought periods of drought that made agriculture more challenging and reduced the agricultural surpluses needed to support large, non-productive populations like religious communities. Perhaps more significantly, the focus of Ethiopian Christianity began to shift toward new centers of power and learning. As the Ethiopian Empire expanded southward and eastward, new monasteries and churches were founded in regions with more favorable climates and better access to trade routes. Lalibela, despite its magnificent monuments, found itself increasingly isolated from the main currents of Ethiopian political and religious life. The arrival of Portuguese missionaries in the 16th century brought additional challenges. While the Portuguese were fellow Christians, their attempts to convert Ethiopian Orthodox believers to Roman Catholicism created tensions that disrupted traditional religious practices. Some of Lalibela's churches were abandoned or converted to new liturgical uses that didn't match their original symbolic purposes. The careful theological program that had guided the site's construction was partially forgotten as new religious influences competed with traditional Ethiopian Christianity. By the 18th century, Lalibela had declined from a major pilgrimage center to a small provincial town. Many of the connecting tunnels and trenches became clogged with debris, while some of the smaller churches suffered damage from neglect and weather exposure. The sophisticated drainage systems required constant maintenance to function properly, but the reduced population could no longer provide the necessary labor and expertise. The rediscovery of Lalibela's significance came gradually during the 20th century, as Ethiopian scholars and foreign researchers began to appreciate the true scale of its architectural achievements. Archaeological investigations revealed the complexity of the underground systems and the precision of the stone carving techniques. Art historians recognize the sophistication of the symbolic program that connected the various churches into a coherent theological statement. Modern conservation efforts face enormous challenges in preserving Lalibela's rock-hewn monuments. Unlike buildings constructed from separate stones that can be repaired or replaced, these monolithic structures carved from living rock are essentially irreplaceable. Cracks that develop in the bedrock can compromise entire churches, while water infiltration can cause gradual erosion that undermines the stability of carved walls and roofs. The site's inclusion on UNESCO's World Heritage List has brought increased attention and resources for conservation work, but it has also created new challenges. The growing number of tourists visiting Lalibela brings economic benefits to the local community, but also increases wear and tear on the fragile rock-hewn structures. Managing the balance between preservation and access remains an ongoing struggle for site managers and conservation specialists. Recent technological advances are revealing new aspects of Lalibela's construction and design. Three-dimensional scanning techniques are creating precise records of the carved surfaces, allowing researchers to detect previously unnoticed details and patterns. Ground-penetrating radar has identified additional underground chambers and passages that may have been sealed or forgotten over the centuries. These discoveries suggest that the visible churches may represent only a portion of the original complex. The acoustic properties of Lalibela's churches present another fascinating area of study. The carved spaces create unique sound environments that enhance traditional Ethiopian Orthodox chanting and music. The builders clearly understood how different ceiling heights, wall angles, and surface textures would affect sound quality, incorporating acoustic considerations into their architectural and artistic designs. Water management at Lalibela reveals engineering sophistication that modern builders struggle to match. The drainage systems not only prevent flooding, but also channel water in ways that enhance the symbolic meaning of the site. The artificial Jordan River that flows between the two main groups of churches required careful engineering to maintain proper flow rates and prevent erosion of the carved channels. The paintings and carvings that decorate Lalibela's churches showcase artistic traditions that developed independently from European and Middle Eastern Christian art. Ethiopian Christian iconography incorporates local cultural elements and artistic techniques, creating visual programs that are both recognizably Christian and distinctly Ethiopian. These artistic traditions continue to influence Ethiopian religious art today, creating direct links between medieval and contemporary cultural expression. Perhaps most remarkably, Lalibela continues to function as an active religious center more than 8 centuries after its creation. Ethiopian Orthodox pilgrims still gather here for major religious festivals, using the churches for the same liturgical purposes their builders intended. The site represents not just a remarkable archaeological monument, but a living religious tradition that has maintained continuity across nearly a millennium. The story of Lalibela reminds us that human creativity and devotion can overcome seemingly impossible obstacles. The builders of this rock-hewn city accomplished something that modern engineers would find challenging even with advanced technology and machinery. Yet they did it with hand tools, human labor, and an unwavering commitment to creating something that would honor their faith and inspire future generations. As conservation work continues and new discoveries emerge from ongoing research, Lalibela stands as both an archaeological treasure and a testament to the enduring power of human vision. In the carved chambers where morning light still illuminates ancient prayers and evening shadows still follow paths planned by medieval architects, the past continues to speak to anyone willing to listen to stories written in stone. The mystery of Lalibela extends beyond its physical achievements to questions about the civilization that created it. How did medieval Ethiopia develop the organizational capacity to undertake such massive projects while maintaining its independence from more powerful neighbors? What role did international trade and cultural exchange play in bringing the ideas and techniques that made such construction possible? How did the builders coordinate the work of thousands of craftsmen to create structures that function together as a unified architectural and theological program? These questions become more intriguing when we consider that Lalibela was just one part of a broader Ethiopian building tradition that created remarkable monuments across the highlands. Rock-hewn churches, elaborate monasteries, and sophisticated urban centers dotted the landscape, suggesting a civilization with capabilities that mainstream historical narratives have often underestimated. In the thin air of the Ethiopian highlands, where ancient faith carved impossible dreams into solid rock, Lalibela continues to challenge our assumptions about what medieval civilizations could accomplish. Its churches remain active, its mysteries remain unsolved, and its testament to human potential remains as powerful today as it was when the last chisel strike echoed through chambers carved from the living earth. Descending from the heights of Ethiopia to the sun-baked plains of Syria, we encounter yet another remarkable lost city that tells a different story of human adaptation and ultimate vulnerability. Palmyra, known to its inhabitants as Tadmor, rose from the Syrian desert to become one of the most powerful and prosperous cities of the ancient world, only to face destruction that would echo across centuries. In the harsh environment of the Syrian desert, where temperatures soar above 110 degrees Fahrenheit and rainfall measures less than 5 inches per year, the very idea of a major urban center seems impossible. Yet here, at a crucial oasis along ancient trade routes, the Palmyrines created a commercial empire that stretched from the Roman frontier to the borders of China. Their success came not despite the desert, but because of their mastery of its challenges and opportunities. The key to Palmyra's prosperity lay in its position at the intersection of multiple trade networks. Caravans carrying silk, spices, and precious stones from Asia had to cross the Syrian desert to reach Mediterranean ports, while goods from Egypt, Arabia, and the Roman Empire flowed eastward through the same routes. Palmyra's merchants didn't just facilitate this trade, they controlled it, creating a commercial monopoly that generated enormous wealth for their desert city. The Palmyrines developed sophisticated techniques for desert travel and trade that gave them decisive advantages over competitors. They bred and trained camels specifically for long-distance caravan work, creating animals capable of carrying heavy loads across waterless terrain. They established way stations and supply depots at strategic points throughout the desert, ensuring that their caravans could travel safely, while others perished from thirst or exposure. Perhaps most importantly, they created a unique blend of diplomacy and military power that allowed them to maintain good relations with both the Roman Empire and the Parthian Empire simultaneously. This delicate balancing act required extraordinary political skill, as Palmyra extracted concessions and protection from both superpowers, while avoiding entanglement in their conflicts. The wealth generated by this commercial success transformed Palmyra into one of the most magnificent cities of the ancient world. The great colonnades stretched for over half a mile through the heart of the city, lined with shops, temples, and public buildings that showcased the artistic and architectural sophistication of Palmyrene civilization. The Temple of Bel rivaled anything in Rome or Athens, while the theatre and agora provided spaces for cultural activities that attracted visitors from across the Mediterranean world. Palmyrene art and architecture reflected the city's position at the crossroads of civilizations. Roman engineering techniques combined with Persian decorative traditions and local Semitic religious practices to create a distinctive cultural synthesis. Palmyrene sculpture, with its frontal poses and elaborate clothing, developed a style that influenced artistic traditions across the Near East. The city's multilingual inscriptions in Palmyrene Aramaic, Greek, and Latin demonstrate the cosmopolitan character of this desert metropolis. The social structure of Palmyra was as complex as its cultural influences. Wealthy merchant families dominated the city's politics and economics, but they shared power with tribal leaders whose followers provided the military force necessary to protect caravan routes. Religious authorities from various traditions coexisted within the city's walls, creating a remarkably tolerant environment for the ancient world. Women in Palmyrene society enjoyed freedoms and opportunities that were unusual for their time. Wealthy women funded public buildings, sponsored religious festivals, and participated in commercial ventures. Some even held official positions in the city's government, reflecting social attitudes that were more progressive than those found in most contemporary civilizations. The military organization of Palmyra combined regular troops with tribal auxiliaries and foreign mercenaries, creating a flexible force capable of both desert warfare and conventional battles. Palmyrene heavy cavalry, armored in the Parthian style, became famous throughout the Roman world for their effectiveness in combat. The city's archers, trained in the harsh conditions of the desert, were prized as mercenaries by armies throughout the Mediterranean region. Yet for all its apparent strength and prosperity, Palmyra contained within itself the seeds of its own destruction. The city's wealth and power inevitably brought it into conflict with the great empires that surrounded it. As Roman control of the eastern Mediterranean weakened during the 3rd century crisis, Palmyra began to assert greater independence, eventually challenging Roman authority directly. The rise of Queen Zenobia marked both the peak of Palmyrene power and the beginning of its downfall. This remarkable woman, whose beauty and intelligence became legendary throughout the ancient world, transformed Palmyra from a client state into an independent empire that briefly controlled much of the eastern Mediterranean. Her armies conquered Egypt, much of Asia Minor, and large portions of the Roman East, creating a Palmyrene empire that stretched from the Nile to the Bosphorus. Zenobia's success was built on careful exploitation of Roman weakness, during a period when the empire faced multiple threats from Germanic tribes, Persian armies, and internal political chaos. She presented herself as a legitimate ruler in the Roman tradition, while simultaneously appealing to Eastern cultural traditions that resented Roman domination. Her court became a center of learning and culture that attracted scholars and artists from across the known world. The collision between Palmyrene ambition and Roman determination was inevitable. Emperor Aurelian, who had restored Roman power through a series of military victories, could not tolerate the existence of an independent empire in the heart of Roman territory. His campaign against Palmyra was swift and decisive, combining superior numbers with tactical innovations that neutralized traditional Palmyrene military advantages. The siege of Palmyra in 272 CE marked the end of the city's independence and the beginning of its decline. Aurelian's forces systematically destroyed the walls, public buildings, and commercial infrastructure that had made Palmyra's prosperity possible. The great merchant families were executed or exiled, their wealth confiscated to fill Roman treasuries. The trade networks that had sustained the city for centuries were disrupted as Roman authorities redirected commerce through different routes. The destruction wasn't limited to physical structures. The cultural and intellectual life that had flourished in Palmyra was systematically eliminated. Libraries were burned, scholars were scattered, and the artistic traditions that had created Palmyra's distinctive cultural synthesis were lost. The multilingual, multicultural society that had made the city a bridge between civilizations was replaced by a small Roman garrison town. Environmental factors may have accelerated Palmyra's decline even after the Roman conquest. Climate data suggests that the region experienced increasing aridity during the late Roman period, making the agricultural systems that supported the oasis more vulnerable to failure. The sophisticated water management techniques that had sustained urban life in the desert required constant maintenance and investment that the reduced population could no longer provide. The rise of new trade routes also contributed to Palmyra's continued marginalization. Maritime commerce became increasingly important as improvements in ship design and navigation made sea travel more reliable and cost-effective than overland caravan routes. The goods that had once flowed through Palmyra's markets began moving through Red Sea and Persian Gulf ports instead, eliminating the economic foundation of the city's recovery. By the Islamic conquest of Syria in the 7th century, Palmyra had dwindled to a small village, clustered around the ruins of its former grandeur. The magnificent colonnades were partially buried by wind-blown sand, while many of the great temples and public buildings had been quarried for building materials. The Arabic name Tadmor, meaning place of dates, reflected the site's reduced status as a minor agricultural center. The rediscovery of Palmyra's historical significance began during the 18th century, when European travelers started visiting the ruins and documenting their remarkable preservation. The dry desert climate had protected many structures that would have been destroyed by weather in more humid regions. Inscriptions, sculptures, and architectural details remained clearly visible, allowing scholars to reconstruct aspects of Palmyrene civilization that had been lost to historical memory. Archaeological excavations during the 20th century revealed the true scale of Palmyra's former importance. The city was far larger and more sophisticated than the visible ruins had suggested. Residential districts, industrial areas, and religious complexes stretched for miles beyond the central monumental zone. Evidence of international trade connections appeared in artifacts from China, India, Central Asia, and the far reaches of the Roman Empire. Recent conflicts in Syria have tragically demonstrated Palmyra's continued vulnerability to human destructiveness. The deliberate destruction of monuments by extremist groups in 2015 and 2017 echoed the Roman systematic elimination of Palmyrene culture 17 centuries earlier. The targeting of cultural heritage as a weapon of war showed how sites like Palmyra remain battlegrounds in conflicts that extend far beyond their physical boundaries. The international response to these attacks revealed how deeply Palmyra had entered global consciousness as a symbol of human cultural achievement. The ruins had become more than archaeological remains. They represented the possibility of peaceful coexistence between different cultures and the tragic consequences when that coexistence breaks down. The destruction sparked worldwide efforts to document and preserve endangered cultural sites using advanced digital technologies. Modern conservation efforts at Palmyra face challenges that go far beyond the recent war damage. The original Roman destruction left many structures in precarious states that have gradually worsened over the centuries. Desert winds carrying abrasive sand particles steadily erode carved surfaces and weaken structural elements. The increasing number of visitors during peacetime brings economic benefits, but also accelerates wear on fragile ancient materials. Climate change poses additional long-term threats to Palmyra's preservation. Rising temperatures and changing precipitation patterns affect the stability of mud brick structures and accelerate the deterioration of stone monuments. The oasis that originally made human habitation possible at the site faces pressure from increased water demands and reduced groundwater recharge, threatening the environmental conditions that have preserved the ruins for centuries. The story of Palmyra serves as both an inspiration and a warning about the possibilities and limitations of human ambition. The Palmyrines created a remarkable civilization that successfully bridged different cultures and mastered one of the world's most challenging environments. Their commercial networks, artistic achievements, and political innovations influenced the development of civilizations across 3 continents. Yet Palmyra's fate also demonstrates how quickly even the most successful societies can be destroyed when they come into conflict with superior force or fail to adapt to changing circumstances. The city's rise and fall remind us that prosperity and cultural achievement, no matter how impressive, remain vulnerable to political miscalculation, environmental change, and the destructive power of human conflict. In the silence of the Syrian desert, where wind still whispers through broken columns and scattered stones, Palmyra continues to pose questions about the nature of civilization and the forces that shape human destiny. Its ruins speak of dreams realized and dreams destroyed, of the heights human societies can reach and the depths to which they can fall. As conservationists work to preserve what remains and scholars continue to uncover new aspects of Palmyrene achievement, this lost city keeps teaching lessons about ambition, adaptation, and the eternal struggle between creation and destruction that defines human history. The legacy of Palmyra extends far beyond its physical remains to influence our understanding of cultural interaction, commercial innovation, and political adaptation in the ancient world. The Palmyrines showed that small societies could achieve greatness by finding their own path between competing great powers, creating cultural synthesis from diverse traditions, and mastering the unique opportunities presented by their environment. Their example continues to inspire communities facing similar challenges of balancing independence with international pressures, tradition with innovation, and local identity with global connections. As the sun sets over the desert where Palmyra once stood as a beacon of prosperity and cultural achievement, we're reminded that human civilization is both more resilient and more fragile than we often imagine. In the interplay between ambition and limitation, between achievement and destruction, between memory and forgetting, the story of this remarkable city continues to unfold, teaching new generations about the possibilities and responsibilities that come with the power to build, create, and dream on a scale that can outlast empires and echo across millennia. From the windswept deserts of Syria, our journey takes us across continents to the mist-shrouded valleys of Peru, where another extraordinary civilization carved its legacy into the very bones of the earth. Here, in the sacred valley of the Incas, lies Ollantaytambo, a fortress city that stands as testament to engineering prowess that continues to baffle modern architects and archaeologists alike. Ollantaytambo wasn't just another Inca settlement. It was a masterpiece of military engineering, urban planning, and agricultural innovation rolled into one breathtaking complex. The name itself carries echoes of resistance and defiance, honoring Ollanta, a general who dared to challenge the Inca emperor for love, transforming this strategic location into a symbol of both loyalty and rebellion that would define its character for centuries to come. The setting alone takes your breath away. Massive stone terraces climb the mountainside in perfect geometric precision, each level carefully calculated to maximize agricultural productivity while creating an impregnable defensive position. The stones used in construction aren't the rough-hewn blocks you might expect from a mountain fortress. These are precisely cut granite blocks, some weighing over 50 tons, fitted together with tolerances that wouldn't embarrass a modern precision manufacturer. Walking through Ollantaytambo today, you're struck by the audacity of its conception. The Inca engineers didn't simply build on the landscape, they reshaped entire mountainsides to create their vision. They diverted rivers, carved channels through solid rock, and created agricultural terraces that still function perfectly after more than 5 centuries. The precision required for such work, accomplished without iron tools or wheeled vehicles, stretches our understanding of what pre-industrial civilizations could achieve. The water management systems at Ollantaytambo represent perhaps the most sophisticated hydraulic engineering of the pre-Columbian Americas. A network of channels, fountains, and drainage systems controls water flow throughout the complex with mathematical precision. During the rainy season, these systems prevent flooding while collecting precious water for storage. In dry periods, they distribute every drop with careful efficiency, supporting both the urban population and the extensive agricultural terraces that fed the garrison. The defensive capabilities built into Ollantaytambo's design reveal military thinking that was centuries ahead of its time. The fortress controls the only practical route through this section of the sacred valley, forcing any attacking army to approach across open ground while defenders rain down projectiles from elevated positions. The terraced construction created multiple defensive lines, each one capable of independent resistance, even if lower levels fell to attackers. Yet the most mysterious aspect of Ollantaytambo lies in its unfinished temple complex on the mountainside above the main fortress. Here, massive stones lie scattered as if work stopped suddenly, leaving behind one of archaeology's most intriguing puzzles. Some blocks show clear evidence of being shaped and positioned, while others appear to have been abandoned mid-construction, still bearing the tool marks of their ancient craftsmen. The quarry for these massive stones lay 6 miles away, across the Urubamba River and up a nearly vertical mountainside. The logistics of transporting blocks weighing dozens of tons across such terrain challenges modern engineering capabilities. Traditional explanations involving ramps, rollers, and human labor seem inadequate when confronted with the practical realities of the landscape and the precision required for final placement. Local legends offer their own explanations for these seemingly impossible achievements. Quechua oral traditions speak of stones that could be made to float like leaves, of ancient masters who possessed knowledge that allowed them to reshape matter itself. While modern scholars might dismiss such accounts as folklore, they reflect the profound sense of wonder that Ollantaytambo continues to inspire in those who experience its monuments firsthand. The agricultural innovations at Ollantaytambo demonstrate Inca mastery of mountain farming techniques that sustained complex civilizations at altitudes where most crops struggle to survive. The terraces create multiple microclimates within a single mountainside, allowing farmers to grow different varieties of potatoes, maize, and quinoa at various elevations. This agricultural diversity provided both food security and the surpluses necessary to support non-productive populations like soldiers, craftsmen, and administrators. The urban layout of Ollantaytambo reveals sophisticated understanding of both practical and ceremonial space. Residential areas are organized around central courtyards that provide privacy while facilitating community interaction. Storage facilities are positioned to take advantage of natural temperature variations and air circulation patterns. Ceremonial spaces align with astronomical phenomena that were crucial to Inca religious and agricultural calendars. The role of astronomy in Ollantaytambo's design becomes apparent when you understand how carefully its builders oriented key structures to celestial events. Windows and doorways frame specific stars and constellations at particular times of year, creating a 3-dimensional calendar that guided agricultural activities and religious observances. This integration of earthly architecture with cosmic cycles reflects a worldview that saw no separation between human society and the natural universe. The Spanish conquest brought dramatic changes to Ollantaytambo's role and significance. During the Great Rebellion of Manco Inca in 1536, the fortress became a crucial stronghold for indigenous resistance against colonial rule. The terrace defences that had been designed to repel traditional Andean warfare proved surprisingly effective against Spanish cavalry and firearms, allowing rebel forces to hold the position for months while organising broader resistance efforts. The Battle of Ollantaytambo in 1537 marked one of the few decisive indigenous victories against Spanish conquistadors. Manco Inca's forces used the fortress's defensive advantages and their superior knowledge of local terrain to inflict significant casualties on Spanish troops commanded by Hernando Pizarro. The victory was temporary, but it demonstrated that proper defensive positions could neutralize many of the technological advantages that had made Spanish conquest seem inevitable. Following the collapse of organized resistance, Ollantaytambo gradually transformed from a military stronghold into a colonial administrative center. Spanish authorities maintained the basic infrastructure while adapting buildings to serve new functions. The precise Inca stonework provided foundations for colonial structures, creating an architectural palimpsest that layered different historical periods in the same physical space. The preservation of Ollantaytambo through the colonial and republican periods was largely accidental. Its remote location in the Sacred Valley protected it from the urban development that destroyed many other Inca sites. The continuing agricultural use of the terraces meant that local communities maintained the water management systems and prevented complete structural collapse. By the time archaeologists began serious study of the site, much of its original character remained intact. Modern archaeological work continues to reveal new aspects of Ollantaytambo's complexity and sophistication. Ground-penetrating radar has identified additional structures buried beneath centuries of accumulated soil and debris. Chemical analysis of construction materials reveals trade networks that brought specialized stones from distant quarries, suggesting logistical capabilities that exceeded even generous estimates of Inca organizational capacity. The acoustic properties of Ollantaytambo's ceremonial spaces demonstrate another dimension of Inca architectural sophistication. Sound behaves in specific ways within the precisely shaped stone chambers, creating effects that would have enhanced religious ceremonies and public gatherings. Modern acoustic engineers study these spaces to understand how ancient builders achieved such sophisticated sound control without the mathematical tools that contemporary architecture relies upon. Recent discoveries include evidence of pre-Inca occupation at Ollantaytambo, suggesting that this strategic location attracted sophisticated societies long before the rise of the Inca Empire. Earlier construction phases showed different building techniques and architectural styles, indicating cultural continuity that spans many centuries. These findings complicate simple narratives about Inca achievement by suggesting that they built upon foundations laid by predecessor civilizations. The agricultural terraces continue to function today, much as they did 5 centuries ago, supporting local communities while demonstrating the sustainability of traditional Andean farming techniques. Modern agricultural scientists study these systems to understand how ancient farmers achieved such productivity in challenging mountain environments. The lessons learned have applications for contemporary efforts to develop sustainable agriculture in similar high-altitude regions worldwide. Climate change poses new threats to Ollantaytambo's long-term preservation. Changing precipitation patterns affect the delicate balance of the water management systems, while increased temperature variations cause thermal stress in the precisely fitted stone construction. Glacial retreat in the surrounding mountains alters water availability and seasonal flow patterns that have remained constant for centuries. Tourism brings both opportunities and challenges for Ollantaytambo's conservation. The economic benefits of heritage tourism provide resources for maintenance and restoration work, while giving local communities incentives to preserve their cultural inheritance. However, the increasing number of visitors also accelerates wear on fragile stone surfaces and creates pressure for modern amenities that can compromise the site's historical integrity. The integration of traditional knowledge with modern conservation techniques represents one of the most promising approaches to preserving Ollantaytambo for future generations. Local communities retain practical understanding of traditional construction and maintenance techniques that complement scientific analysis and modern materials. This collaboration between indigenous expertise and contemporary conservation science creates more effective and culturally appropriate preservation strategies. The mystery of Ollantaytambo extends beyond its impressive engineering to questions about the civilization that created it. How did the Inca develop such sophisticated understanding of astronomy, hydraulics, and metallurgy without apparent precursors in the archaeological record? What role did knowledge transfer from earlier Andean civilizations play in their achievements? How did they coordinate the massive labor forces required for such complex construction projects across difficult terrain? The unfinished temple complex poses particular puzzles that continue to challenge archaeological interpretation. Why was work abandoned so abruptly that tools and partially shaped stones were left in place? Was the interruption caused by the Spanish conquest, internal political changes, or some other factor that disrupted the project? What was the intended function of this massive construction that required such enormous stones to be transported across seemingly impossible terrain? The social organization required to build and maintain Ollantaytambo suggests levels of administrative sophistication that rival modern bureaucracies, coordinating the work of stonecutters, agricultural specialists, water engineers, and construction crews while maintaining food supplies and security for the entire operation required systems of communication, record keeping, and resource allocation that functioned without written language as we understand it. The role of women in Ollantaytambo society remains largely hidden in the archaeological record, but hints suggest they played crucial roles in both religious and economic activities. Certain structures appear designed for functions traditionally associated with female work in Andean societies, while the layout of residential areas suggests domestic arrangements that accommodated extended families and complex kinship relationships. Religious practices at Ollantaytambo blended Inca state religion with older Andean spiritual traditions that connected human communities with the landscape itself. Sacred spaces within the complex honor mountain spirits, water deities, and astronomical phenomena that were believed to influence agricultural fertility and community well-being. These religious elements weren't separate from practical activities, but were integrated into daily life through architectural features and ceremonial practices. The artistic traditions represented in Ollantaytambo's stonework and decorative elements showcase technical skills that matched the engineering achievements. Stone carving techniques produced both monumental architectural elements and delicate decorative details with equal precision. The integration of functional and aesthetic considerations in every aspect of construction reflects cultural values that saw no separation between practical necessity and artistic beauty. The strategic importance of Ollantaytambo within the broader Inca road system demonstrates how individual sites functioned as parts of larger imperial networks. The fortress controlled access to jungle regions that provided tropical products essential to highland populations, while serving as a staging area for military operations and administrative activities throughout the eastern portions of the empire. Today, as conservation efforts continue and new technologies reveal previously unknown aspects of the site, Ollantaytambo stands as both an archaeological treasure and a living community where traditional practices continue alongside modern life. The stones that witnessed ancient ceremonies still frame contemporary festivals, while the terraces that fed Inca armies now support families whose ancestors may have helped shape these monuments. In the thin air of the sacred valley, where morning mist still rises from ancient terraces and afternoon shadows follow paths planned by master builders, Ollantaytambo keeps teaching lessons about human capability, cultural continuity, and the eternal dialogue between ambitious vision and practical constraint. The precision of its construction speaks to human potential, while the mystery of its unfinished temple reminds us that even the most carefully planned projects remain vulnerable to forces beyond our control. The legacy of Ollantaytambo extends far beyond its role as a tourist destination or archaeological site. It represents a different way of thinking about the relationship between human society and natural environment, one that achieved remarkable sustainability while supporting complex civilization in challenging mountain terrain. As contemporary societies grapple with questions of environmental balance and cultural preservation, the achievements of Ollantaytambo's builders offer both inspiration and practical guidance for creating built environments that enhance rather than degrade their natural settings. The whisper of wind through ancient stones carries us now from the heights of the Andes to the scorching sands of the Sahara, where beneath the relentless sun lies evidence of a civilization that challenges everything we thought we knew about Africa's past. Here, in the heart of the Libyan desert, where temperatures soar beyond human endurance and water is more precious than gold, the ruins of Garama tell a story that archaeologists are only beginning to understand. Imagine trying to build a thriving urban centre in one of Earth's most hostile environments. The Sahara isn't just hot and dry. It's a landscape that seems actively opposed to human habitation. Yet the people who created Garama didn't just survive here. They flourished for over 1,000 years, creating a sophisticated society that controlled trade routes stretching across the entire African continent. The Garamantians, as they came to be known, developed technologies that seem almost impossible given their environment. They created an irrigation system called Foggara, underground channels that carried water across hundreds of miles of desert terrain. These weren't simple tunnels dug through sand. They were precisely engineered aqueducts carved through bedrock, designed with gradients so exact that water flowed steadily across vast distances without pumps or external power sources. The scale of this achievement becomes clear when you realize that the Garamantian Foggara system included over 4,500 individual channels, totaling more than 2,500 miles in length. That's longer than the distance from New York to Los Angeles, all carved by hand through solid rock in an era when iron tools were luxury items. The precision required for such work demanded mathematical and engineering knowledge that rivals modern hydraulic projects. But water was just the foundation of Garamantian success. With reliable irrigation, they transformed patches of desert into productive agricultural land, capable of supporting substantial urban populations. They grew dates, millet, and sorghum in quantities sufficient not just for local consumption, but for export to distant markets. They raised cattle, goats, and horses in regions where such animals shouldn't have been able to survive. The wealth generated by this agricultural surplus funded trade networks that connected sub-Saharan Africa with the Mediterranean world centuries before the famous trans-Saharan caravan routes of medieval times. Garamantian merchants controlled the flow of gold, ivory, precious stones, and exotic animals northward, while bringing manufactured goods, salt, and luxury items southward to communities scattered across the African interior. Archaeological evidence reveals a society of remarkable complexity and sophistication. The capital city of Garama featured substantial stone buildings, elaborate burial complexes, and workshop areas where skilled craftsmen produced goods for both local use and international trade. The urban layout shows careful planning, with residential districts, commercial areas, and religious complexes arranged according to principles that maximized both functionality and defense. The Garamantians developed unique metallurgical techniques adapted to their desert environment. They learned to work with iron at temperatures that would have been impossible to achieve in more humid climates, creating tools and weapons that gave them significant advantages over neighboring peoples. Their metalworking traditions influenced technological development across much of sub-Saharan Africa, spreading innovations that shaped civilizations for centuries to come. Perhaps most remarkably, they created artistic traditions that blended influences from across Africa and the Mediterranean world into distinctive styles that reflected their unique cultural position. Rock art found throughout their territory depicts not just local scenes but images that suggest contact with peoples from thousands of miles away. Horses, chariots, and human figures wearing elaborate costumes appear alongside local wildlife in compositions that tell stories we're only beginning to decipher. The social structure of Garamantian civilization appears to have been both hierarchical and remarkably inclusive. Elite burials contain luxury goods imported from distant lands, while more modest graves show that even ordinary citizens had access to manufactured goods and exotic materials. This suggests an economic system that distributed wealth more broadly than was typical in ancient societies, perhaps reflecting the collaborative effort required to maintain their desert cities. Their military capabilities were legendary throughout the ancient world. Roman sources describe Garamantian warriors as formidable opponents who used their intimate knowledge of desert terrain to devastating effect against conventional armies. They perfected techniques of desert warfare that allowed small, mobile forces to defeat much larger enemies through superior tactics and environmental adaptation. The Garamantians also developed sophisticated astronomical knowledge that enabled them to navigate across featureless desert terrain with remarkable accuracy. They understood celestial cycles well enough to predict seasonal changes, crucial for agriculture and travel planning. Their astronomical observations may have contributed to the development of navigation techniques that later facilitated trans-Saharan trade on a much larger scale. Yet despite their obvious achievements, the Garamantians remain largely unknown to popular consciousness. Their civilization flourished for over a millennium, from roughly 500 BCE to 700 CE, yet they left behind no written records that have survived to modern times. Everything we know about them comes from archaeological evidence, foreign accounts, and the stories told by their monuments and artifacts. The reasons for Garama's eventual decline mirror challenges faced by desert civilizations throughout history. Climate change during the early centuries of the Common Era brought increasing aridity to the Sahara, making their already challenging environment even more hostile. The underground water sources that fed their Fagara systems gradually declined as regional water tables dropped, forcing communities to abandon settlements they had occupied for generations. Political pressures also played a role in the Garamantians' downfall. The expansion of Islamic armies across North Africa during the 7th and 8th centuries disrupted established trade networks and imposed new political realities on desert communities. The Garamantians, who had successfully resisted Roman expansion for centuries, found themselves unable to adapt to these new challenges while simultaneously dealing with environmental stress. Perhaps most significantly, the very success of their water management systems may have contributed to their ultimate failure. The extensive Foggara networks required constant maintenance by specialists who understood the complex engineering principles involved. As populations declined due to climate stress and political disruption, maintaining these systems became increasingly difficult. When key sections failed, the cascade effects could render entire regions uninhabitable within a generation. The rediscovery of Garamantian civilization began only in the 20th century, when European explorers started documenting the extensive ruins scattered across the Libyan desert. What they found challenged prevailing assumptions about African history and technological capability. The sophistication of the archaeological remains suggested a level of social organization and technical knowledge that didn't fit comfortable narratives about primitive African societies. Modern archaeological work continues to reveal new aspects of Garamantian achievement. Satellite imagery has identified thousands of previously unknown settlement sites, suggesting that their civilization was far more extensive than earlier estimates indicated. Ground-penetrating radar has mapped Foggara systems that remain buried beneath centuries of sand accumulation, revealing the true scale of their hydraulic engineering projects. Recent discoveries include evidence of long-distance trade connections that extended far beyond Africa. Chinese silk, Indian Ocean pearls, and Mediterranean glass have all been found in Garamantian archaeological contexts, suggesting commercial networks that spanned continents. These finds indicate that the Garamantians weren't isolated desert dwellers, but active participants in international commerce during antiquity's most dynamic period. The agricultural techniques developed by the Garamantians offer valuable lessons for contemporary efforts to develop sustainable farming in arid regions. Their methods for soil conservation, water management, and crop selection achieved productivity levels that modern desert agriculture struggles to match. Understanding their techniques could contribute to current efforts to address food security challenges in similar environments worldwide. The social innovations that allowed Garamantian civilization to thrive in such challenging conditions also provide insights relevant to contemporary challenges. Their ability to coordinate large-scale public works projects, maintain complex trade networks, and integrate diverse populations into coherent communities offers lessons for modern societies facing similar coordination challenges. Climate data from the Garamantian period provides crucial information for understanding long-term environmental change in the Sahara region. Their civilization coincided with the final stages of the Sahara's transformation from savanna to desert, a process that dramatically altered the geography and ecology of an entire continent. Studying how they adapted to these changes helps scientists understand both historical climate patterns and potential future scenarios. The artistic legacy of the Garamantians continues to influence contemporary African art and culture. Their rock art traditions established iconographic conventions that persisted long after their political collapse, influencing the visual culture of peoples across the Sahel and Sudan. Contemporary artists and scholars increasingly recognize the Garamantians as foundational figures in African cultural development. The mystery of Garamantian writing systems remains one of archaeology's most intriguing puzzles. While they clearly possessed sophisticated administrative capabilities and maintained extensive trade records, no clearly decipherable Garamantian texts have been identified. Some scholars believe they used perishable writing materials that haven't survived in the archaeological record, while others suggest they may have relied on oral traditions and symbolic systems that we don't yet understand. The religious beliefs and practices of the Garamantians remain largely mysterious despite extensive archaeological investigation. Their burial practices suggest complex beliefs about death and afterlife, while architectural features at major sites indicate sophisticated ceremonial activities. The integration of astronomical observations with religious practices suggests worldviews that connected human society with cosmic cycles in ways that influence both practical activities and spiritual beliefs. The technological innovations developed by the Garamantians extended far beyond their famous water management systems. They created new techniques for desert transportation, developed specialized tools for working in extreme heat, and invented construction methods adapted to environments where conventional materials were unavailable. Many of these innovations spread throughout Africa and beyond, influencing technological development across multiple continents. The linguistic heritage of the Garamantians presents another fascinating area of study. While their language hasn't been definitively identified, linguistic analysis suggests they spoke languages related to modern Berber and possibly other African language families. Understanding their linguistic relationships could provide crucial insights into population movements and cultural exchanges that shaped African history during antiquity. The military innovations developed by the Garamantians influenced warfare throughout the Saharan region for centuries after their political collapse. Their techniques for desert combat, logistics, and fortification were adopted by successor peoples who continued to use Garamantian strategies in conflicts with both African and foreign enemies. These military traditions contributed to the development of the great medieval African empires that controlled trans-Saharan trade. Today, as climate change once again transforms the Saharan environment, the example of the Garamantians offers both hope and warning. Their success demonstrates that human ingenuity can overcome seemingly impossible environmental challenges, creating prosperous societies even in Earth's most hostile regions. Yet their ultimate failure reminds us that even the most successful adaptations remain vulnerable when multiple stresses combine to exceed a society's capacity for response. The ruins of Garama still rise from the desert sands, their broken walls and empty streets testament to both human achievement and human vulnerability. In the silence of the Sahara, where wind whispers through ancient stones and sand slowly reclaims what was once a great city, the legacy of the Garamantians continues to challenge our understanding of what civilizations can accomplish and what forces ultimately determine their fate. Their story reminds us that human history contains many more chapters than we often realize, that remarkable achievements have occurred in places and times we rarely consider, and that the challenges we face today have been confronted by previous generations who found their own solutions to seemingly impossible problems. In the desert, where they built their impossible cities, the Garamantians left us more than ruins. They left us proof that human determination and ingenuity can flourish anywhere, even in the harshest corners of our planet. From the blazing sands of the Sahara, our journey carries us across the Indian Ocean to the Emerald Islands of Southeast Asia, where another lost civilization challenges our understanding of what ancient peoples could achieve. Here, on the Indonesian island of Java, the massive monument of Borobudur rises from misty rice paddies like a stone mountain shaped by divine hands. Its terraced levels ascending toward the heavens in perfect geometric harmony. Borobudur isn't simply a temple. It's a three-dimensional mandala, a spiritual map carved in stone that guides pilgrims through the Buddhist path to enlightenment. Built sometime in the 8th or 9th century, during the height of the Sailendra dynasty, this magnificent structure represents one of humanity's most ambitious attempts to create heaven on earth, a physical manifestation of Buddhist cosmology that continues to inspire wonder more than 1,000 years after its completion. The sheer scale of the undertaking defies easy comprehension. We're talking about a monument that rises 115 feet above the surrounding plain, constructed from over 2 million stone blocks quarried from nearby volcanic hills and transported to the site by methods that remain mysterious. The precision required to create such a massive structure, while maintaining perfect proportional relationships between its 9 levels, suggests mathematical and engineering knowledge that rivals modern architectural achievements. What makes Borobudur truly extraordinary isn't just its size, but the sophistication of its symbolic program. Every aspect of the monument's design carries meaning within Buddhist philosophy and Javanese cosmology. The square base represents the earthly realm of desire and suffering, while the circular upper terraces symbolize the spiritual realms of formlessness and enlightenment. The transition from square to circular geometry reflects the spiritual journey from material concerns toward ultimate liberation. The monument functions as both architectural masterpiece and religious textbook, with over 2,600 relief panels telling stories from Buddhist literature and Javanese culture. These carved narratives don't simply decorate the walls, they create a carefully planned educational program that teaches Buddhist philosophy through visual storytelling. Pilgrims walking the prescribed clockwise path around each level encounter increasingly sophisticated spiritual concepts as they ascend toward the summit. The technical challenges overcome by Borobudur's builders seem almost impossible given the tools and techniques available in 9th century Java. The foundation system, designed to support millions of tons of stone on unstable volcanic soil, required engineering solutions that modern construction projects would find challenging. They created elaborate drainage systems to prevent water damage during Java's intense monsoon seasons, while building techniques that have allowed the structure to survive numerous earthquakes over the centuries. The stone carving displayed throughout Borobudur represents artistic achievement that rivals the greatest sculptural traditions anywhere in the world. Individual relief panels show extraordinary attention to detail, with facial expressions, clothing patterns, and architectural backgrounds rendered with remarkable precision. The consistency of style and quality across thousands of carved figures suggests workshops of master artisans working according to established aesthetic standards and iconographic conventions. The astronomical alignments built into Borobudur's design demonstrate sophisticated understanding of celestial mechanics and their integration with religious symbolism. Key features of the monument align with significant astronomical events, creating connections between earthly pilgrimage and cosmic cycles that enhance the spiritual experience for ancient visitors. These alignments weren't accidental, but reflected deliberate choices that connected Buddhist philosophy with observations of the natural world. Yet despite its obvious importance and magnificent preservation, Borobudur was gradually abandoned sometime around the 10th or 11th century, left to be slowly reclaimed by tropical vegetation. The reasons for this abandonment remain unclear, though they likely involved complex interactions between political changes, religious shifts, and environmental pressures that made maintaining such a massive monument increasingly difficult. The conversion of Javanese rulers to Islam during the 15th and 16th centuries created additional challenges for Buddhist monuments like Borobudur. While Islamic rulers didn't actively destroy the structure, they had little incentive to maintain facilities associated with religious traditions they no longer supported. The monument gradually disappeared beneath layers of volcanic ash and tropical growth, becoming little more than a hill covered with trees and legends. Local Javanese communities preserved oral traditions about the buried monument, but specific knowledge of its original purpose and significance was gradually lost. By the time European colonists arrived in Java, Borobudur had become a mysterious hill that local people associated with supernatural powers and ancient curses. These folkloric associations both protected the site from casual vandalism and discouraged systematic exploration of its secrets. The rediscovery of Borobudur began in 1814, when British administrator Thomas Stamford Raffles heard local stories about ancient ruins hidden in the jungle. The initial clearing work revealed the monument's basic structure, but decades of patient archaeological work were required to fully understand its original appearance and function. Early restoration efforts, while well-intentioned, sometimes caused damage by using inappropriate materials and techniques that didn't account for the monument's original engineering principles. Modern conservation efforts have faced enormous challenges in preserving Borobudur for future generations. The tropical climate creates conditions that accelerate stone deterioration, while air pollution from increasing industrialization and vehicle emissions causes chemical damage to carved surfaces. The growing number of tourists visiting the site brings economic benefits, but also increases physical wear on the ancient stonework. Perhaps most significantly, Borobudur sits in one of the world's most geologically active regions, where volcanic eruptions and earthquakes pose constant threats to structural integrity. The monument has survived numerous seismic events over the centuries, but each earthquake causes cumulative damage that gradually weakens the structure. Modern engineering assessments have identified areas where the ancient foundation systems need reinforcement to prevent catastrophic collapse. The UNESCO World Heritage designation has brought international attention and resources to Borobudur's conservation, but it has also created new pressures and expectations. Balancing preservation needs with tourism demands requires constant negotiation between different stakeholders with sometimes conflicting priorities. The challenge of maintaining authenticity while implementing necessary structural improvements continues to generate debate among conservation specialists. Recent archaeological work has revealed previously unknown aspects of Borobudur's original context and construction. Ground-penetrating radar has identified buried structures that may have been part of a larger temple complex, suggesting that the visible monument represents only a portion of the original religious center. These discoveries raise new questions about the scale and organization of the Sailendra dynasty's building projects. The relationship between Borobudur and other contemporary monuments in central Java suggests a level of cultural and artistic coordination that implies sophisticated administrative systems. The nearby temple of Prambanan, dedicated to Hindu deities, was built around the same time as Borobudur, indicating that Buddhist and Hindu traditions coexisted peacefully in ancient Java. This religious tolerance created conditions that encouraged artistic innovation and cultural synthesis. The social organization required to build Borobudur provides insights into Javanese civilization during its classical period. Coordinating the work of thousands of craftsmen, laborers, and administrators while maintaining agricultural production and political stability required institutional capabilities that challenge simple assumptions about medieval Southeast Asian societies. The monument represents not just religious devotion, but also demonstrates organizational sophistication that enabled complex collective projects. The artistic influences visible in Borobudur's sculptural program reveal cultural connections that extended far beyond Java itself. Indian artistic traditions provided foundational iconographic conventions, while local Javanese cultural elements created distinctive syntheses that influenced artistic development throughout Southeast Asia. The monument serves as a crucial link in understanding how artistic and religious ideas spread across the Indian Ocean world during the medieval period. The symbolic geography embedded in Borobudur's design reflects sophisticated understanding of both Buddhist philosophy and Javanese cosmological concepts. The monument functions as a microcosm of the universe, with each level representing different realms of existence and stages of spiritual development. This integration of architectural form with religious meaning creates educational experiences that continue to function effectively for contemporary visitors. The acoustic properties of Borobudur's terrace design create unique sound environments that enhance meditation and ceremonial activities. The stone surfaces and spatial arrangements affect how sound travels and resonates within different areas of the monument, creating acoustic effects that the original builders clearly understood and incorporated into their design. Modern acoustic analysis reveals sophisticated understanding of how architectural form can influence spiritual experience. The water management systems integrated into Borobudur's design demonstrate practical engineering solutions adapted to Java's challenging climate. Hidden drainage channels prevent water accumulation that could damage the structure during monsoon seasons, while surface treatments direct rainwater away from vulnerable carved areas. These systems continue to function after more than 1,000 years, testament to the skill of their original designers. The botanical knowledge reflected in Borobudur's relief carvings provides valuable information about historical biodiversity and agricultural practices in medieval Java. Detailed depictions of plants, trees, and agricultural scenes serve as historical records of species that may no longer exist in the region, while also documenting traditional farming techniques and landscape management practices that sustained complex urban civilizations. The mathematical principles underlying Borobudur's proportional relationships reveal sophisticated understanding of geometric concepts that influenced architectural traditions throughout Southeast Asia. The monument's dimensions follow precise ratios that create visual harmony while also carrying symbolic meaning within Buddhist numerical traditions. These mathematical relationships demonstrate intellectual achievements that complement the obvious artistic and engineering accomplishments. The role of women in the society that created Borobudur can be glimpsed through the monument's relief carvings, which depict women in various social roles and activities. These carved scenes provide rare insights into gender relationships and women's participation in religious, economic, and cultural life during the Sailendra period. The artistic evidence suggests more complex and varied roles for women than many historical sources typically document. The economic foundations that supported Borobudur's construction reflect the prosperity of medieval Javanese civilization and its integration into wider Indian Ocean trade networks. The resources required for such massive construction projects indicate agricultural surpluses and commercial connections that brought wealth from across Southeast Asia and beyond. Understanding these economic relationships helps explain how relatively small kingdoms could undertake such ambitious cultural projects. The religious practices associated with Borobudur extended far beyond simple pilgrimage to include complex ceremonial activities that connected local communities with broader Buddhist traditions. Archaeological evidence suggests that the monument served as a center for religious education, meditation retreats, and major festivals that attracted participants from across the region. These religious functions made Borobudur a cultural center whose influence extended far beyond its immediate vicinity. The technological innovations required for Borobudur's construction influenced building techniques throughout Southeast Asia for centuries after its completion. Methods for quarrying and transporting massive stone blocks, techniques for precise stone carving, and systems for organizing large construction projects all spread to other regions through cultural exchange and migration. The monument thus represents not just artistic achievement, but also technological advancement that had lasting impact. Today, as conservation efforts continue and new research reveals additional aspects of this remarkable monument, Borobudur stands as both an architectural treasure and a living spiritual center, where Buddhist pilgrims still come to walk the ancient paths toward enlightenment. The stone terraces that witnessed medieval ceremonies continue to host contemporary rituals, while the relief carvings that educated ancient visitors still teach timeless lessons about suffering, compassion, and the possibility of liberation. In the misty dawn light of central Java, where volcanic peaks rise above rice terraces and ancient stones hold the memory of countless prayers, Borobudur continues to fulfill its original purpose as a bridge between earthly concerns and spiritual aspirations. The monument reminds us that human creativity and devotion can create lasting beauty even in the face of time's relentless passage, and that the deepest human concerns transcend cultural boundaries and historical periods to speak directly to the universal search for meaning and transcendence.